Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 172 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where, well, it looks like we're going to be the only guests without a gift after all.
Don't look at me. I'm not asking for anybody's hair. I get enough weird looks. Thank you.
Seriously, man. It's that internet search history.
Man, the things I do for this podcast, between Celeborn's original name and, well, anyway.
Well, yeah, just leave it there. Go on now. Moving on.
Move along. Nothing to see here. Folks, go ahead and pull up a bench in the common room, please. And we'll be right there. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, who is neither grasping nor ungracious, at least not today, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Sean, but I still don't want anybody's hair, golden or otherwise, so keep those scissors to yourself.
Well, don't worry. These certainly aren't for my hair, man. I don't even know if there's enough left to cut with scissors anymore. No, actually, I brought these scissors so that we could cut to the next segment.
Oh,
Get it? Get it?
I get it, all right.
I mean, you do edit this show with scissors and tape, right?
Yeah.
We don't have any fancy digital way of editing this show, do we?
Of course not. No, I print it out on reel to reel, and then I just use a pair of scissors and some Scotch tape.
You've got like the light, and you've got like the little banker's visor on, looking really closely at them. Anyway, why don't we get to it?
I think we should. Well, today we're starting the show with a special guest who's working on something very cool that we know you're going to enjoy hearing about.
Absolutely. Well, we've crossed paths with our guest tonight a couple of times. We first met him back at Myth Moot 5 in 2018, and then had a chance to hear him give a talk last year at Tolkien 2019 in Birmingham. I even had the pleasure of hanging out with him on that trip to Sarehole Mill that I mentioned a few episodes ago.
And he's been on our short list of people that we wanted to have on the show ever since. So we asked him, and, well, he said yes. So why don't we go and introduce him? James Tauber is a technologist, software developer, and level 20 word nerd.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's very impressive. I'm only up to like 11 now. He blows
That's
me
terrifying.
Up, so.
I'm like a 6 on a good day. He's got an interest in linguistics, philology, and digital humanities. And you'll get to hear how all of those come together in just a moment.
His scholarly interests are wide-ranging, from biblical and classical Greek to Germanic philology, I say with admiration.
And not just a hint of jealousy.
And not just a hint of jealousy, it's true. And he's done some great work with the good people at Signum University as well. But as much as I want to hear about all of those things, today we're going to be mostly talking to him about something a little bit closer to home. The Digital Tolkien Project.
Now, the Digital Tolkien Project is a scholarly project focused on Tolkien from both a linguistic and digital humanities perspective. And we want to understand exactly what that all means right now. So, James Tauber, welcome to the Prancing Pony Podcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it truly is a pleasure, and I can't wait to get into this. So let's go ahead and get started. And James, we always like to start by getting to know our guest a little bit better. Anytime we have a guest on, we like to hear a little bit about how they first discovered Tolkien's work. So that's the first question I'm going to put to you tonight. When and how did you first discover Tolkien's work? What was it like for you? And what is it that's kept you coming back?
So I have somewhat of an unusual story with regard to sort of my progression through the works of Tolkien. I probably have the most unusual order in which I've read the books. Although I did start, like many people, with The Hobbit. When I was about 11 years old, I was a huge fan of The Hobbit, absolutely loved it. And my aunt knew that I was a fan. And so for my 12th birthday, bought me a copy of Return of the King. And I figure she didn't know that it was the last. The third part.
Yeah.
I did, and I thought I can't read this. I haven't read the first two volumes, but I thought, well, I can't read the main text, but let me dive into the appendices. So the first thing I read after The Hobbit was actually the appendices of Lord of the Rings. And
Wow.
I actually became really, really fascinated by the First Age. And then I found out about this book that was so difficult that even adults had trouble with it, which as a 12-year-old, that was like magic to my ears. I'm 12 years old. If I can understand this book, then wow. So, of course, I borrowed the Silmarillion from the library.
Yeah.
And I didn't get very far, but I did become really enamored by the Ainulindalë, the myth of creation I was an aspiring composer at the time, still am.
Oh, yeah.
And
oh, wow.
And so it was a huge inspiration for me musically.
Sure.
And then I became really obsessed by that. And then I found out that Tolkien's son was publishing these works that had more information about this first age stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went tracking down. I think The Shaping of Middle-earth had come out around that time, and it had earlier drafts of the Einlindale in it. And so I think that was the next thing I read was Shaping of Middle-earth. So
wow,
I was deep in the history of Middle-earth before I ever opened Fellowship of the Ring.
That is hilarious.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was actually many, many years later when the Peter Jackson movies came out that I said, okay, I really need to read Fellowship of the Ring before I see the movie.
Yeah,
so
that's kind of a must.
Lord of the Rings was the last works that I read, actually. So, yeah.
That is funny.
I
can't even imagine going from The Hobbit to the appendices to the Silmarillion to the history of Middle-earth.
To the history. I mean, that is deep end. That's right.
The interesting thing, though, is I look back and I realize that that's really what planted the seed in me for my interest in languages.
Yeah.
The thing that really stood out, besides the first age sort of chronology in the appendices, the other thing that grabbed my attention was the information on the Tengwar and Kurds.
Yeah.
And I look back and realize, you know what? I understood all these philological terms that I learned formally much later on. I understood them when I was 12 because Tolkien talked about them, and they seemed really cool then.
Yeah, I remember a similar feeling myself when I discovered the appendices, and I think it has been absolutely formative for me, and just sort of being a lifelong lover of language. So yeah, very cool.
Definitely. Well, I understand that you have a story that I think our listeners are going to enjoy. Something about sound designing for The Lord of the Rings? Tell us a little bit more, James.
Yeah, so back in 2003, I guess it was, I decided to go to the One Ring Oscar party.
Yes.
For might have been the Return of the King one. I went to both the Two Towers and Return of the King Oscar parties.
That's unbelievable. Sean and I were both at that as well.
Wait, that was the one in L.A., the one in Hollywood?
Yeah, all three of those were in L.A. Yeah, they were all at the...
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah, we were all there.
That is previously determined that Alan and I were both there.
Yeah, we didn't meet. But we were there. That was the one.
Yeah.
If it was the one where they all stood on stage and held up their Oscars, that was the Return of the King one.
Yeah,
it was. Yes, exactly. Because there weren't
party.
as many wins in the second one.
That's right.
So at the time, quick backstory. At the time, I was living in Australia but working for a US company. I was traveling back and forth a lot, and whenever I was in the US, I got put up in a $59 a night Fairfield Inn. So I got huge numbers of Marriott points, and I got the top status on Marriott because it doesn't matter whether you're staying in the cheap Fairfield Inn or the highest end. You still get the same number of nights. Right. And so I had diamond status or whatever. And one of the things that you get as a diamond status member is you can get a room at a hotel even if it's sold out.
Right.
And so I decided I'm going to stay at the actual hotel next to the Kodak Theatre or whatever it is. It's sold out. It's sold out 6 months in advance, but they like, oh no, you're a diamond member. We'll let you stay here.
Right.
The night before the Oscars, I go down to the bar and have a few drinks, and there's a bunch of people there I recognize from, actors and so on, and I get chatting to this guy at the bar. And he turned out to be a below-the-line agent. So in film terminology, below the line means not the actors, directors, writers, but people like the cinematographer and the editor and the composer. And so he was obviously thinking sort of in that mode of I'm trying to network with people in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And we get talking about interests, and because of my interest in music and sound and stuff like that, we got talking a little bit about that.
Uh-huh.
And then he said, oh, so what are you actually doing here in LA? And I said, I'm here for the Lord of the Rings Oscar party. And I don't know how this happened. I don't know if he'd had too many drinks or I'd had too many drinks. But he said, you were the sound designer on Lord of the And I tried to say no, but he just completely ran with it. And I told my best friend this story, and later that year we did a short film together, and it did some festival play. We were at a film festival in Florida, Palm Beach International Film Festival, and my friend decided to go up to somebody in one of the special guests at the film festival,
right,
and say, "You should come over and meet my friend James. He was the sound designer on Lord of the Rings."
Oh my gosh!
He's really shy about it. So if you ask him, he'll deny it.
Oh no!
That's great.
This famous documentary filmmaker comes over to me and says, "Were you the sound designer on Lord of the Rings?" And I said, "No." And she said, Why are you so shy about it? You should be proud of the fact you were." And I'm like, "I wasn't." And she's like, "Why are you denying it?" I'm like, "'Cause I wasn't." And there was nothing I could say at that point to convince her that I was not the sound designer on Lord of the Rings.
The more you denied it, the more convinced she was it was true.
Exactly.
Oh, that is comedy gold right there.
That's brilliant.
Oh, that is. Your best friend is he's quite the trickster.
Yeah, hats off to your friend for that.
That is a great prank right there, man.
That's awesome.
That is funny stuff.
All right, James. Well, now let's talk a little bit about digital humanities. Now, this is a term that I've heard a few times. I know a little bit about the concept, but a person like me has barely just scratched the surface. So for me and for everybody else out there who's not too familiar with digital humanities, tell us, what is this field and how did you get involved?
Yeah, so digital humanities at the core is, as the name suggests, really just the application of digital technologies, computers, to the traditional study of the humanities. It really had its origins more around literary study than anything else. In fact, in the early days, it was sometimes called literary computing or humanities. Then as it broadened, it sort of became humanities computing, and then digital humanities is the name that it's had for probably the last decade or two. So it's really just focused in the application of computers to humanities, whether it's the electronic studying of texts, or as it grew, also incorporating things like images and map and sort of geographical information and audio and video and all sorts of aspects like that, really taking any field within the humanities and taking a computational approach to it. And in a lot of cases, the emphasis was on how much broader you could go with these technologies. So one of the things that digital humanities has enabled that never would have been possible before is a study across, for example, thousands of novels at a time. So what were the trends in word usage across thousands or tens of thousands of novels in the 19th century or 20th century? Something that no human could have ever done. But once you get all the texts in a computer, you can do what's referred to as distant reading, sort of really taking the bird's eye big picture.
Right.
But it also facilitates sort of the other end of the spectrum, which is much more close reading. That tends to be used a lot more in sort of historical language texts in Latin and Greek and so on, where it's a lot more about, what does this one word in this passage mean? Or, what does this one sentence mean? That tends to not be as much of a focus in literary studies as it is in something like classics. And so digital humanities really covers that whole gamut, not just texts, but everything else that's involved in sort of the liberal arts as well.
Wow.
So this is the kind of thing, you mentioned classics, and I've used the Perseus Digital Library online before, and it's the kind of thing, for people who haven't used it, it's the kind of thing where you can look at a Greek text in Greek, and you can actually click a word, and it'll take you to the lexicon entry for that word, and it'll show you what it means, and then also where it's been used in other literary works and that sort of thing. That's the kind of thing we're talking about here, right?
Exactly. So my entry into all this, I studied linguistics as an undergraduate student, with that seed planted by Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings dependencies. I studied linguistics, but my particular interest, as I think you mentioned already, was in biblical and ancient Greek. And so unlike my fellow linguistics students who did their linguistic research by interviewing speakers of unusual languages, I didn't have any native speakers I could go talk to. So the only resource that I had was to study the texts computationally. So if I was interested in whether a particular sentence structure happened in Greek, I would basically be doing a search on a computer of large amounts of text.
Right.
And that was really only possible because of projects like the Perseus Digital Library. Greg Crane, the founder of the Perseus Digital Library, had this vision for basically making all of the texts available freely, along with tools for studying the language behind it and the use of words and so on.
It's an amazing set of tools, and just as me, who's sort of an amateur classicist these days, it's something I go and play around with sometimes, and it's amazing potential there.
Yeah. So, James, then you started the Digital Tolkien Project. Now, aside from the obvious answer that you're a Tolkien fan and a linguistic fan, what made you realize that Tolkien's work specifically could benefit from a digital humanities approach, and how did you get started?
Again, the seed was planted much earlier on than when I actually started working on it. One of the things that I've noticed over many years is that various humanities scholars, when you find out that they're also Tolkien fans, and they've kind of checked you out and worked out that you're also a Tolkien fan, they confide in you. They confide in you and say, you know what? Tolkien, more than anyone else, reminds me of my scholarly pursuits. So I've had conversations with biblical scholars who say, reading the Silmarillion reminds me of studying the Old Testament more than anything else. Or classicists will say, the same thing, that basically there's a richness to Tolkien that is rivaled only by this sort of literature that's been around for thousands of years. And it is, I guess, worthy of that same kind of close scholarly study. And it was that sort of realization, alongside the fact that I was myself starting to do a lot more digital humanities work and working on the Perseus Digital Library, all of a sudden occurred to me, well, hang on a sec. I'm applying all these digital techniques to the study of ancient Greek, for example. If Tolkien is a philologist worthy of philological study himself, then what would it look like to actually treat his works the same way that we treat Homer or the Old Testament? And so that was really the idea behind the Digital Tolkien Project, was to say, there is a richness here that actually warrants applying this sort of rich approach, computational approach, with the obvious difference, of course, that these aren't thousands of years old works that are out of copyright.
Right. Yeah, that is a big challenge, isn't it?
And I found, of course, that there are other scholars that have been doing computational work on Tolkien before. It's tended to be very, very siloed. There's a lot of reinventing the wheel that has to happen every time somebody wants to do a particular study of Tolkien. And so I started thinking about, if we took a really systematic approach to modeling the text and modeling references to the text, we may be able to move things forward in terms of the scholarship while still respecting the rights of the Tolkien estate and the publisher.
Of course. Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about one or two of your key projects right now? I've taken a look at the website and I see there's a number of things going on. Why don't you just kind of tell us some of the big ones?
Yeah. So, the starting point of any sort of philological endeavor is establishing the text that you're going to use, getting that in a usable electronic form, and then also having a good referencing scheme behind it. And so a lot of the initial work was just in the preparation of texts, and then having a mechanism for referencing those texts that's independent, for example, of the physical book. So in other words, you don't want to use page numbers to refer to things. You actually want to look more at the logical structure.
Right.
Paragraph numbers, for example. And that's fairly easy in The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and the Silmarillion. Of course, it gets crazy difficult in History of Middle-earth.
Right.
But that's actually where the real value comes in, because a lot of work has been done within digital humanities on how do you actually electronically represent manuscript tradition and changes in manuscript in a way that you can much more easily tease out the history and changes and so on. There's a tremendous philological endeavor that was undertaken by Christopher Tolkien, but he was doing it in a very manual, laborious way. It's not that the digital techniques necessarily shortcut any of that scholarship, but what the digital techniques do is enable you to take the scholarship once you've done it and really visualize it in more useful ways, to integrate it better with other things that people are doing. So just to pick an example, so once you say you've got the text established with some referencing scheme of say we're doing Lord of the Rings, one of the things you might want to do next in terms of next level of detail of analysis of the text is understanding when are people speaking, what words are in direct speech versus a narrative. Because once you've done that, if you combine that with sort of the information about who's doing the speaking and so on, you can start to do really interesting analyses of how do different characters differ in their speech.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, Sean, back with the Council of Elrond. And
that's what I was thinking.
And we noticed the individual, the style of speech that Elrond had versus Boromir versus even when they were quoting Isildur's words on the scroll.
Right.
And how each of them had that, rich variance, and each of them spoke to the culture and history.
Right.
Exactly. So
that's fascinating.
You can do it manually at a very sort of fine-grained level, but if you wanted to look across the whole work and say, does the choice of vocabulary of the hobbits cluster together in a way that it's easy to identify, that a hobbit's speaking, but are there differences then within that between, say, Sam and Frodo? Does Frodo's speech change over time? But the key thing is that in order to do that kind of study, you have to first have the text electronically. You have to have marked up and represented in the computer all the bits of speech that are going on and who's saying them. Sometimes that's not easy to establish because pronouns are used, and it will say, he said, and you've got to work out, well, who's he in the context?
Right.
Yeah.
And other times it's it's Gandalf saying the words, but he's quoting another character.
Right, exactly. You get this kind of, I'm reporting what somebody else said and so on.
Right. The Council of Elrond.
Yeah.
And so the idea really is that if we can, what I'm really interested in doing is collaborating with others on all of these different things so that if somebody has a particular research question about speech patterns, for example, they're not having to reinvent the wheel and spend most of their time getting the text ready and marking up the speech and so on, because we already have that.
Right.
So it's really about more than addressing the actual scholarly questions ourselves. We're really trying to act more as facilitators and say, we're wanting to provide the data and the tools that the scholars can then take advantage of to answer the questions they have about the text.
And that's great.
Wow.
So, and that's just an example with speech. There's other things. So I was just going to say there's other things as well, just in terms of what in my world are referred to as named entities. So people, places, events, things that have names, really studying those in detail. One of the challenges there is, just because it's a little different than searching for just doing a text search for a word, because you can't just do a text search for Denethor and assume it's always a particular Denethor. There are multiple Denethors.
True.
So there's that disambiguation, but there's also, of course, all the different names that exist for certain people. Aragorn has an unbelievable range of different names that are applied to him.
Almost as much as Turin.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, yes. So if you want to do any kind of study, if you're wanting to do something like find me all the places where Aragorn is mentioned, you can't just do a text search, right?
No,
you actually have to have done that work of indicating where all the named entities are and so on. And so that's another example of the kind of groundwork we're trying to lay in order to then facilitate further scholarship.
Wow.
Absolutely.
The more I think about it, the more, wow. I mean, absolutely. To be able to search and say, okay, how many times is Minas Tirith mentioned? Well, it might also be the White City.
Right.
Or it might also be, Minas Anor if you're looking in the history books. So, wow. Yeah. Being able to identify and lump those together.
Yeah. And then you can combine those two things. So you may have a question about, is a particular character or a particular race more likely to refer to a particular place by a particular name?
Yes. Or a
So, for
particular person
example,
you
and
might be
very
talking about.
bizarrely, Faramir uses Linda Lórien as a name, as a name. Who else does that, right? That's those kind of questions you could very easily
Right.
ask if
Ooh,
you've marked
fun
up
stuff.
speech and you've done the
Right.
named entity. Yep.
Wow.
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 That something like that would just be so fun. We've talked about like Lórien and how to some people it's the Golden Wood and it's a scary place, and to some people it's something different. Just I'm amazed by the possibilities. I just
I
what
know.
you could do with this is just amazing. I guess that's how I'd put it.
Agreed. So, James, question: what's the end goal here? What is the project going to look like when it's finished, or is this the kind of thing that's really never going to be finished? And then, what will scholars and fans be able to do with it?
So that, to a large extent, depends on whether I can get the Tolkien estate and HarperCollins on board with some of the things I want to do. There's certain things that we could definitely be able to do in terms of just agreed upon referencing systems and the ability to share certain data that doesn't involve sharing the text itself. But one of the things I would love to see at the end of the day is an environment similar to the Percy's Digital Library for Tolkien scholars to use to interact with the Tolkien text. And that would obviously, because of the copyright nature of the works, that would need to be something that's probably subscription based and controlled and so on.
Yeah.
So it's unlike the Percy's Digital Library, but using those same kind of technologies that are used in the state-of-the-art study of historical language texts to be able to apply that to the works of Tolkien.
Wow.
Great. Well, and what can people listening out there in the Tolkien community, what can they do to help you?
So I think the main thing that I would love is to hear from people about the kinds of research questions they have that they think could be answered by this sort of approach, because that will really drive priorities. Obviously, there's more that we could do than I have time for, and so
there always is, right?
Prioritizing what would be the most useful things to work on is extremely helpful. So I'd love to hear from Tolkien scholars who are saying, you know what, if I could do X, if I knew X about the text, that would enable me to further my research and answer these questions. I would absolutely love to hear from people.
Excellent. Well, once again, James, we thank you for joining us here today, and we know our listeners are going to want more. So we're gonna leave an open invitation for you to come back here on the Prancing Pony Podcast. It's been a real pleasure having you today.
Thank you very much.
It truly has.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. And listeners, you can find James's work online at digitaltolkien.com, and you can find his email address there if you'd like to get in touch with him. And I know he'd love to hear from you.
Yes, he would. And with that, we'll return you to the podcast in progress.
Well, that was a lot of fun, and
it was.
It is such a cool project. I would love to get James back on the show again sometime soon for a longer interview.
Definitely, agreed. But for now, let's get back to the book, because we love the books here at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
Yes, we do. Folks, you know we bring you other Tolkien stuff from time to time, but at heart, Alan and I are fans of Tolkien's books and books about Tolkien. That's our passion.
And as you know, we read a lot of books in preparation for the show every week. Now, if you want to get your hands on a book that we've mentioned, you're going to want to check out the official library page of our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. There we have links to every book we've mentioned on the show.
And there's a lot of other stuff on our website, too. We've got some show notes up there and book links specific to each episode, outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and some other little extras. You'll also find a link to our online storefront at teespring.com/stores/PPP, where you can find shirts, mugs, stickers, and other cool PPP gear. So please, go ahead and check that out.
And now let's join the company as they leave the lovely land of Lórien, lingering no more before their long journey south.
Wow, alliteration for the win, man.
Alliteration for the win, I think, actually.
Oh,
no, the lo guy, no.
That's Saruman's song. We'll get to that in the next book.
Yes, we will. All right. I'm going to go ahead and have you pick up literally where we left off last time with Galadriel giving her gift to Sam. Let's continue with the gifts, shall we?
I have been waiting all week to see what the rest of these gifts are going to be.
I know. It's like a kid at Christmas. What's in the package?
Why did everybody else get their gifts and I have to wait? Poor Sam and Gimli and Frodo have to wait for their gifts. Well, because their gifts are mostly better than belts and bows.
Well, yeah. Bows made with elven hair. Not creepy at all.
No, but not Galadriel's hair. We'll get to that.
No.
All right. For you, little gardener and lover of trees, she said to Sam, I have only a small gift. She put into his hand a little box of plain gray wood, unadorned save for a single silver rune upon the lid. Here is set G for Galadriel, she said, but also it may stand for garden in your tongue. In this box there is earth from my orchard, and such blessing as Galadriel has still to bestow is upon it. It will not keep you on your road, nor defend you against any peril, but if you keep it and see your home again at last, then perhaps it may reward you. Though you should find all barren and laid waste, there will be few gardens in Middle-earth that will bloom like your garden, if you sprinkle this earth there. Then you may remember Galadriel, and catch a glimpse far off of Lórien that you have seen only in our winter. For our spring and our summer are gone by, and they will never be seen on earth again save in memory. Sam went red to the ears, and muttered something inaudible, as he clutched the box, and bowed as well as he could.
I wonder what he muttered. I feel naked again. I mean, what
there was definitely an aw shucks in there.
There was.
You gotta think.
Shucks. Probably, yeah. Something like that.
It's a cute moment. I love Sam's
It
reaction.
is. I love the G rune and the fact that she said, well, it doesn't have to stand for Galadriel. It could just be garden.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Which makes you realize that, this whole book is written in Westron, right? And it's translated into English for us.
Right.
So whatever the word is for garden in Westron,
must
it
start
must start
with
a G, or must start with the same letter as Galadriel does in Elvish.
That's a very good point. I hadn't thought about that.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We'll never know what that word is, I don't think, unless somebody's got some manuscript somewhere that records it. But anyway. So little box of plain gray wood filled with earth from Galadriel's orchard. And her blessing, such blessing as she has still to bestow. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. It's a recognition that, it's like her admitting like, oh, this is just a little thing. This is just a little trifle. I don't have the power I once did, but here, what I have is in this. That's so cool.
Yeah. But note, though, that blessing isn't powerful enough to do much more, right? It's not going to protect them. It's not going to defend him. It's not going to help him on this quest. It's only for if he gets back. Yeah. This is, in a way, she's giving him something to hope for, isn't she? This isn't going to help you, but you need to have hope. Yeah.
That is a great point. Absolutely. Yeah. This is the reward. This is something that will reward him someday if he makes it back. So this is what he's going to hope for.
Keep your eye on the prize, little man. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, since you put it that way, this is something to hope for. Is this gift what could change Sam's Amdir hope into Estelle hope? I don't know. I mean, not like the box is any reason to believe that he's going to get back home, but
I'm fated to bring the box back to the Shire.
I'm sure. Not when I put it like that, but does it give him something to base it on? I don't know.
That's the thing. I think so. There's some sort of maybe an indication that there is a greater power at work here. I think he'll see plenty of evidence of that later. So not, that may just be a little nudge in the right direction at this point. But it's definitely the kind of thing that can give him hope. If I make it back, I'll get to see what this does. And this is going to be amazing. I love to be in my garden, and I can't wait to bring this back. Yeah. That's neat.
I also appreciate her comment that, few gardens in Middle-earth are going to be as awesome as your garden if you use this stuff there. And it's going to remind you of Lothlórien. And it reminds me of last time we talked about second best things, right? We talked about Lothlórien being a second best thing to Lórien in Valinor, or Valinor in general.
Right.
And this is kind of going to make the Shire a next best thing to Lothlórien. I think it's going to be, there won't be a Lothlórien anymore. She said here that, even the Lothlórien you see before you is just, this is our winter.
Yeah. This is fated. It's nowhere near what it originally was.
Yeah. And so he's just going to have a little bit to remember it by. And it's not going to be as nice because, again, this is a world that is constantly sort of falling,
That's right.
But
if you have this, you'll catch a glimpse far off.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the idea is there's this slight recollection, just like when we were in Lothlórien. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then we get this wonderful comment about spring and summer. Our spring and our summer are gone by. You've seen this place only in our winter. She's not just talking about this year, is she?
No, she is not. I think that last little bit about they'll never be seen on Earth again is evidence of that.
Yeah, this is not like, oh man, you should have come by here in March. It would have been awesome.
Yeah.
No,
come back, come back in April or May.
Come back in a couple of months. No,
right.
that's not what this is. This is their winter. This is it. This is it for them.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pick up then, since we've just finished with Sam's gift, with the gift we've all been waiting for, the gift for Gimli, which is absolutely nothing.
I know. She didn't bring anything for him.
I know. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up right there. And what gift would a dwarf ask of the elves? Said Galadriel, turning to Gimli. None, lady, answered Gimli. It is enough for me to have seen the Lady of the Galadrim, and to have heard her gentle words. Hear all ye elves, she cried to those about her. Let none say again that dwarves are grasping and ungracious. Yet surely, Gimli, son of Glóin, you desire something that I could give? Name it, I bid you. You shall not be the only guest without a gift. There is nothing, Lady Galadriel, said Gimli, bowing low and stammering. Nothing, unless it is permitted to ask, nay, to name a single strand of your hair, which surpasses the gold of the earth as the stars surpass the gems of the mine. I do not ask for such a gift, but you commanded me to name my desire. The elves stirred and murmured with astonishment. Some of them probably giggled like we are. And Celeborn gazed at the dwarf in wonder.
Not giggling, I'm sure.
Probably a little more than just wonder. But the lady smiled. It is said that the skill of the dwarves is in their hands rather than in their tongues, she said. Yet that is not true of Gimli. For none have ever made to me a request so bold and yet so courteous. And how shall I refuse, since I commanded him to speak? But tell me, what would you do with such a gift? Treasure it, lady, he answered, in memory of your words to me at our first meeting. And if ever I return to the smithies of my home, it shall be set in imperishable crystal, to be an heirloom of my house, and a pledge of goodwill between the mountain and the wood until the end of days. Then the lady unbraided one of her long tresses, and cut off 3 golden hairs, and laid them in Gimli's hand. These words shall go with the gift, she said. I do not foretell, for all foretelling is now vain. On the one hand lies darkness, and on the other only hope. But if hope should not fail, then I say to you, Gimli, son of Glóin, that your hands shall flow with gold, and yet over you gold shall have no dominion. Wow.
Very nicely done.
Well, thank you, sir.
This is such an iconic moment, isn't it? I know that's
really
an incredibly cliche thing to say.
And we say it about every other episode, but this
I know
really
we
is.
do. I know
this
we do.
Really
but these last few gifts, it just really, like we talked about last time, you get Aragorn's is pretty cool, and then you get through a bunch of them in like a paragraph, and then you get some really heavy hitters thematically, emotionally, and this is the one that I think we all we've been talking about it for years on this show. Yeah, because it goes back to Fëanor and
exactly. That's right, and it speaks to the beginning of the healing of the relationship between elves and dwarves.
Yeah,
this is a central moment, and I think it also speaks to what we end up seeing as the friendship between he and Legolas.
Yes, definitely,
and the importance of that too. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So let's go back to the beginning and unpack it a little bit. So
please do.
She starts out by
warning: we will be mocking her a little bit. Just
of course,
to be clear.
Yeah, we've got to. Not Keely and Tauriel level mocking.
No. But I didn't bring a gift for you because you're a dwarf, and we don't have any dwarf presents here. I went to the closet and looked in the box that said dwarf presents, and I couldn't find one.
That is interesting because it does seem as though she doesn't have a gift for him. She doesn't have anything else prepared, and she has
nothing prepared.
And it's not like
not even a belt, not a sheath, not a knife, nothing.
No.
I mean,
but she had something for everybody. I mean, she had belts for Merry and Pippin and Boromir,
and Boromir.
Right?
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm,
yeah. And Gimli must be thinking like, what? She didn't even get me a belt,
Seriously.
Because, yes, she asks Gimli what gift he would want. She also asked Aragorn, but only after she had already had a gift to give him.
Yeah, a jeweled sheath with the history of the sword and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, do you want anything else?
Right. Whereas Gimli, she doesn't seem to have anything else for him. She just asks him what he wants.
Right.
That tells us something. It's not like she was planning to leave Gimli hanging. It's not like she was like, I don't know. She knew something, didn't she?
I think she did. I mean, otherwise she would have at least brought him a gift card.
Something.
I mean, that's kind of I don't know what to get.
Starbucks or something. Card. I mean, it's very impersonal, but I mean, it it's something.
You give them to everybody. It's what you give to the postman. It's what you give to the guy at the grocery store that checks your bags all the time. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
And Celeborn probably won't let her give him a $10 Starbucks card. He's going to make her give him a $5 gift card.
Right, of course.
Don't give $10 to the dwarf. But still, she would have had something for him. She knew. That's what Galadriel does. She knows.
She knows. That's her job. She doesn't foretell. She doesn't counsel. Right. She knows. And she knows. Right. She knows that there's something here. She saw it the very moment that he first stepped into, their little treehouse of royalty there. And
the treehouse of royalty.
I wanted to say Treehouse of Horrors from The Simpsons. No, that's not it. That's a terrible idea. But yeah, this is not her saying, oops, I forgot.
Right.
And I don't think this is her saying, I really didn't know what to get you. This is, I want to hear your heart.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear what you want.
Yeah.
Because I probably already know it because I'm Galadriel.
Right.
And that's the thing. We've got to remember she has an ability to see the very core of a person.
Mm-hmm.
She knew.
Or if she didn't know exactly what he was going to ask for.
Well, right.
She must have known, I don't need to have something for him because I know he's going to ask me for something and I'm going to be able to give it to him when he asks.
Right. And it'll be significant. Yeah.
Yeah.
But interestingly, Hammond and Skull make an observation. I mean, well, they don't make an observation. They make a point. But they make the same observation we just made, which is that she came sort of theoretically unprepared to give a present to Gimli. So then they rightly point out that she could have easily provided another belt or brooch. Then they go on to speculate, like we have, that maybe she'd already read his mind about what he wants. And then interesting, this has to do with the earlier drafts. They mentioned that way back in those early drafts, when Gimli was to receive the elf stone, yes, that's right, the elf stone.
That's right,
now, granted, that is way too far afield for us to cover in the episode, but maybe we'll touch on that in the postscript.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a fun thing to talk about. Now, she still didn't have a gift set aside even in that early draft. Instead, he got it after a similar interchange given as, quote, a sign that goodwill may be remade between dwarves and elves. So even at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's so telling because I think that really is ultimately why she just knew that this was the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that this was an opportunity to reconcile elves and dwarves.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how Celeborn feels about it.
Yeah, but Celeborn might be a little...
Yeah. She's making goodwill between herself and the dwarves, maybe not between her husband and the dwarves.
Oh, no.
Celeborn probably doesn't like dwarves any more than he did before after this.
Yeah, so, I mean, Celeborn may be uncomfortable, but this is not his call.
Right.
This is hers. And
right. This is her acting on... She's sort of an agent of a plan here that she, I think, partially understands.
I think so. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, about her kind of value, the way she values the dwarves. I think she sees this also, high-level move here. This is a strategic move. This isn't just, oh, Gimli's so nice for a dwarf. I'm going to go ahead and do whatever he wants. It's, here's a chance for me to utilize a dwarf who's willing to compromise a little bit and see us as good people in order to bring peace with the dwarves so that we can utilize them as warriors. We'll find out later that she has this, understanding that dwarves are good fighters and she wants them on her side.
Yeah. And so she's going to humble herself a little bit here. She doesn't say, you know what, Gimli, you're so nice. I have picked out the best gift for you. Here it is.
Right.
She asks him, so what would you ask of us? What would a dwarf ask of the elves? And so she puts it in his court. She lets him name his gift.
Yeah.
And so it is a chance for her to, to really kind of come down to his level, really. Because, I mean, this is Galadriel we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
She's above everybody else in this story.
Everybody else.
And
Aragorn,
she comes down.
you're nothing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, really. Yeah.
Right. Everybody. Okay, not Gandalf, I guess, but you know what I'm saying.
Okay.
But she comes down to Gimli's level, and I think that right there is the ultimate token of friendship. And so she knows what she's doing here. Absolutely.
Yeah, she condescends, not in the bad way like we talk about somebody being condescending, but she condescends
you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
to be at his level and to speak to him directly and give him this beautiful gift. Yeah.
Right. And so Gimli says very courteously, you know what? Mm-hmm. I don't need anything. It is enough to have seen you and heard your words.
Wow.
Wonderfully courteous, very undwarf-like, according to Galadriel, but she says that in such a lovely way.
Doesn't she?
You know?
And she certainly says it like it's a stereotype. I mean, she may not be agreeing with that statement, but clearly, apparently, the word around here is that dwarves are grasping and ungracious because
right.
It's not, don't let anybody say this. It's like, don't let anybody say this again.
Yeah.
So apparently it has been said. Yeah.
People say this about the dwarves.
Right.
And clearly this guy is not.
Yeah.
And she repeats the question again. Come on.
Yeah.
What is it you want?
And now she actually tells him, I bid you.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you want something. Name it. And that gives Gimli the opportunity to go ahead and say what he wants. And it's a lovely request. He starts to kind of hem and haw, but eventually he lands on just naming a single strand of her hair. But look at the way he says it, which surpasses the gold of the earth as the stars surpass the gems of the mine. Would you ever imagine a dwarf to say that?
That's exactly it. It's better than all the things dwarves just love. I mean,
that's right.
This is what dwarves are known for loving. And Gimli has found something greater than that.
That's right.
Something greater than material wealth.
Which is key because then we go to the end of this. We'll get to that, but let's come back to that. So sure we remember that he's pointing out that there are things more important than material wealth.
Yeah.
That's central.
Yeah. And again,
then, of course,
it's not like we've never seen dwarves, come around to that before.
No, of course.
But we've also seen in The Hobbit, we've seen dwarves, certain dwarves especially, just really fall into that greed for material wealth and what it's done to them. So Gimli is really breaking the mold here.
Yes, he is. And I love that he says, and I'm not really asking for that. I'm just telling you you wanted to know what I wished. That's what I wish.
And the way she worded it, she said, what do you want? Name it, she says.
Right.
Name it. And so then he doesn't ask. He says, okay, I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to name what I would like.
Yeah.
I'm not asking for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm not asking for it. I just wanted to name one of your hairs.
Yeah. I know asking would be presumptuous, but I'm just going to name what I'm thinking of. Pretty smooth. It's pretty smooth. You got it.
It's very smooth. I mean, he would do well like on speed dating. I mean, he's really good with the words really quickly. Yeah, I'm impressed.
Can you imagine Gimli leaving the speed dating thing with like 20 strands of hair from different colors?
20 strands of hair. And everybody else is walking away totally empty-handed. No phone numbers, no nothing. Gimli's got a hair from everybody.
Yeah.
That would be a great little comic. That's good stuff.
That would. So, Celeborn, we have a little fun at Celeborn's expense here.
We do.
Gazing at the dwarf in wonder. And probably jealousy.
If you want to call that wonder, I call that barely restrained rage.
Yeah, probably a little bit. What did you say to my wife?
Yeah, say what?
But it's sweet. It's like it's a courtly love thing. Well, I shouldn't go there because really there's an underbelly to courtly love that's it's unseemly. Much less pure than that. But this is a very pure kind of love.
This is.
And it's
an admirable love.
We can make fun of Celeborn a little bit, but it really is. It is something pure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is. It really is. Gimli doesn't have any ulterior motives here. He's not.
No, he doesn't.
I mean, we may joke about that, but this is no, not Gimli.
Yeah, no, not at all.
And certainly not Galadriel for that matter. But it's
my husband's right over there.
I know. I'm married to that guy.
Right.
He's the king. Anyway.
Well, the Lord at least,
Well, right. That's true. Not the king. That's a good point. They are not king and queen. They are lord and lady.
Right. But so she asks, first of all, she calls it out as Oh gosh, where is it?
Oh, bold
it's
and
a
courteous.
bold and courteous
Yeah.
request. A request so bold and yet so courteous.
Mm.
But then she asks the practical question, but what would you do with it if you had it? You know, she's amused by this. And
I know. What are you going to do with hair?
And I don't mean amused in like like in a condescending way. I think she's genuinely amused by this.
Right.
And I think she's
like happy. Like, well, that's an interesting
Yeah.
idea. What would you do with that? I mean, you're not going to use it for dental floss. So what in the world are you going to use it for?
I'm going to restring Legolas's bow with it.
That's right. We think it'll add like a +2 to his rolls, you know.
It probably would, man.
I'm sure it would. Oh, goodness. So he tells her what he would do. He would treasure it in memory of the kind words that she said when they first arrived. And let's remember, that's what he said was enough. Earlier, what did he want? Oh, you know what? Nothing. It was just enough to see you and hear your words. And now he's saying, well, I would treasure this as a memory of those words and set it in crystal as an heirloom and as an eternal pledge of goodwill.
Wow.
That's really, really important.
Yeah. Why crystal? Why do you think crystal?
Well, because setting them in some sort of metal would make them invisible. You wouldn't see them anymore. I mean,
that's a fair point.
Setting them in wood is kind of pointless. I don't know, Sean.
That's a very, very practical and a very obvious answer that I didn't think of. I'm thinking of the symbolism of crystal. You know, you think of crystal as,
course.
Something hard and something.
I'm so sorry. I did.
No, you're absolutely right. It was a silly question. It was a totally silly question.
Well, you were trying to lead me to an answer, and I didn't see it coming. But yeah, you're right. There's a permanence to it. There is a durability.
I mean, he doesn't say diamond, so it's not like it's, this is a symbol of the eternal bond or anything. But it is. There's,
Could one set it in diamond? I mean, you can't really crack open a diamond, put the hairs in, and glue the diamond back together.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could drill a hole, but yeah. I mean, with a crystal, you could grow a crystal around it because you can grow crystals. So maybe that's what he's talking about. What are you snickering at?
I'm just imagining Gimli getting one of those like little science kits that my kids
science
have.
Kits, yeah.
You mix the powder in the water.
And you make a crystal.
And dip the hair in it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. And it just comes out like rock candy.
Right, exactly.
No,
it crumbles.
No, it's nothing like that. I'm making light of it. I didn't mean to go down that road, but it's just, it's a beautiful, it's clear, and it's, I don't know, it just reminds me of, well, I guess we're going to talk about that in a minute. So
yeah,
we'll leave that there.
We'll just leave that there, folks. What else might be crystal?
What else does it remind us of when we compare it to crystal?
What other important
objects
in Middle-earth appear to be like some sort of crystal substance?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let's leave that there.
All right.
But I do think that last bit is crucial, and I think that also points to the idea of crystal. This isn't just for him. This is a sign of friendship between peoples. And I think that is a very good reason for keeping it in crystal. He could put it in a metal tube and he knows what's in it.
Right.
But he wants to put it in crystal so that everyone can see it.
Because it's symbolic.
Friendship.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely symbolic.
And the line works, man. She unbraids her hair.
Gimli's smooth and suave.
Yep.
Rico suave.
And she cuts off 3 golden hairs.
Yeah.
And doesn't just give them; she lays them in his hand. There's a delicateness to that gesture. Well,
because if you don't, they're probably just going to fall to the ground. You won't be able to find them. Everybody look for a hair. It's golden.
I keep looking for symbolism, and you're being too practical, man. Stop.
I'm trying to imagine somebody literally trying to lay 3 hairs in my hand. I mean, the slightest breath, and they're gone.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, obviously, elf hair is strong enough to string a bow, so maybe
that is true. Maybe it's a little hardier, a little thicker.
Maybe
What conditioner they use?
I don't know.
Anyway.
So she lays them in his hand, and she gives them words to go with the gift.
Yes.
But she doesn't foretell.
No.
She just says.
Yeah. She's not foretelling, though.
I mean, I guess this is
Don't confuse
hope.
this for foretelling.
Yeah. This is ultimately hope, really.
It is.
Because she
says,
like
we talked about with Sam's
gift. Fail.
It's just like with Sam's gift. There's if you succeed, if the hope wins out,
if
you finish this mission,
you will be rich.
Here's the good thing.
Yeah. You will be rich. Your hands shall flow with gold. but you will not
Right.
succumb to greed. Over you, gold shall have no dominion.
That's right. No dragon sickness for you. No.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, that goes back to what we were saying a little while ago about how he's really breaking the mold here. He's triumphing over that usual dwarvish temptation, isn't he?
Yes, he is. All right, but you know what? Before we move on, this really is an absolutely ideal chance to thwack the Fëanor piñata.
I was hoping you were going to get to this soon.
How could I not? Please. This is such a sweet opportunity. We have to.
It is.
I want to read from Unfinished Tales, a passage that we have read at least 4 times on this show.
Definitely.
And we'll read it every season if we can. In the history of Galadriel and Celeborn, where else, right? Here we get this. Even among the Eldar, she was accounted beautiful, and her hair was held a marvel unmatched. It was golden like the hair of her father and of her foremother Indus, but richer and more radiant, for its gold was touched by some memory of the star-like silver of her mother. And the Eldar said that the light of the 2 trees, Lórien and Telperion, had been snared in her tresses. Many thought that this saying first gave to Fëanor the thought of imprisoning and blending the light of the trees that later took shape in his hands as the Silmarils. For Fëanor beheld the hair of Galadriel with wonder and delight. He begged 3 times for a tress, but Galadriel would not give him even 1 hair. These 2 kinsfolk, the greatest of the Eldar of Valinor, were unfriends forever. Oh yeah, the famous unfriending passage.
Yes.
But
she
wow.
clicked unfriend. Ew, Uncle Fëanor.
I know, creepy uncle. Stop following me on Facebook, please.
Seriously.
But look at the hair. I mean, wow. A marvel unmatched, golden, rich, radiant, the light of the trees snared in her tresses. That's amazing description.
Touched, not just gold, but touched by some memory of the star-like silver of her mother.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the most beautiful way of saying that there's just a hint of silver to the gold.
Yeah. And a little bit of sort of that radiance that silver and gold both have.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, of course, they even use the word richer and more radiant, but that's the thing. It's like there's almost a white gold element to it with that silver in it.
Yeah, just like a little bit of that going through the yellow. And remember, her name, Galadriel, means maiden crowned with radiant garland. So
yes, it does.
Obviously, her hair was truly something special. Her hair was, I mean, it's what she was named for.
That's right. That's right.
It was a very striking feature of her. Her hair is truly special.
Yes, it is. This isn't just
I don't know if she can put anybody to sleep with it, but it's special.
Lúthien. Yeah, and nor grow it from the top of a treehouse all the way down to the ground. That's pretty impressive stuff there, Rapunzel. So, Raputhian.
Raputhian? That sounds strange.
That does. Rapunzian is probably better.
There's a hint of, oh, bother in there.
Oh, bother. Oh, nicely played, sir.
Thank you.
Well, now that we've bashed Fëanor just a little bit, it is time for us to move on to Frodo's gift. And I am going to have you read that.
All right.
Everybody, do you know why I'm having Sean read this next section?
They'll know in about 2 sentences.
Rhymes with Bendel.
Anyone?
Yeah.
Something Endil.
Something EAR.
Something EAR Endil.
All right, Sean, read the passage that was foretold for you from the beginning of time.
All right, sounds good. And you, ring-bearer, she said, turning to Frodo, I come to you last, who are not last in my thoughts. For you I have prepared this. She held up a small crystal phial. It glittered as she moved it, and rays of white light sprang from her hand. In this phial, she said, is caught the light of Eärendil's star, set amid the waters of my fountain. It will shine still brighter when night is about you. May it be a light to you in dark places when all other lights go out. Remember Galadriel and her mirror. Frodo took the phial, and for a moment as it shone between them, he saw her again standing like a queen, great and beautiful, but no longer terrible. He bowed, but found no words to say.
Oh, I love that.
Mm.
Just
again, more and more iconic with these moments, of course, and we know. Well, we've got a lot to say about this file for sure.
The rest of this chapter is pretty much iconic, which is why we're reading just about every last word of it. I apologize.
We are today, aren't we? Yeah.
Mr. and Madam Estate people, please don't send us a letter. We are trying so hard not to read everything. But what a great passage that is. I love the beginning of it. Last in deed, but not last in thought.
Oh, far from it, really. I mean,
oh, yeah. He's the reason they're all there. Yeah.
Absolutely. He's the most important. This is like save the best for last.
That is correct.
And so she gives him the crystal phial. We all know it. We all love it. Containing the light of Eärendil in the waters of her fountain. She's caught the light in the liquid and filled the phial with it.
Which is very Valinorian to begin with, isn't it?
Very.
Light is liquid. Yeah.
Yes. That's a good point. Yeah. Going back to the two trees and the idea of light as a liquid.
The vats.
Light that drips from the trees. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I do have a little bit of word nerdery on phial.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
I figured you
would.
Oh,
wait. Hold. Did that sound... I have some word nerdery on file. Like, it's on file.
It did sound like that, didn't it?
It did. And it was well done, and you didn't even catch it.
I didn't even
You're so subtle, it's
really
beyond you. Yeah.
I don't even get my own humor anymore.
Oh, so droll. So droll.
I'm so witty, I'm over my own head.
Oh, man. Wow. Okay, then.
All right.
Next.
So, phial, Phial. This was a spelling of this word that I hadn't seen as a teenager when I first read this book. I don't know about you, Alan.
Nope, hadn't seen it before.
Nope, I certainly had not seen it. Maybe because we're American.
That's
It
quite
is
possible.
obviously just a variant spelling of vial, Vial.
Right.
And it is actually, the PH spelling actually puts it closer to the Greek origin of the word. The word actually comes from Greek phiale, which is a shallow bowl for drinking. It's not, we normally think of a vial as a tall, narrow glass container
almost
of some sort.
like a test tube, practically.
Yeah, a test tube, like a very small bottle. In Greek, a phiale was actually a shallow bowl, something that was wider than it is tall.
Of course.
So yeah, I only knew it from this book. I was actually pleasantly surprised when I was an undergrad, and I came across the Greek word phiale in a passage from the Greek New Testament that I was reading in class one day.
All right.
But that is actually where it came from. Both of the spellings, PH and V, have both been around in English for about the same time. Phial first shows up, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, in 1384 in John Wycliffe's Middle English translation of the Bible. Vial with a V shows up in 1386 in Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. So 2 years apart, that's nothing. They basically came in at the same time. The PH version, according to the OED, the PH version still appears as a variant in British English, and it did when Tolkien was writing.
Oh, okay.
Although I have to trust the dictionary on that because it is completely non-existent in American English. I have never seen anyone in America spell it PH.
Nope. Not in anything prior to when I read The Lord of the Rings, and not since in any other word.
Not since, right? Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So this phial radiates its own light, and it's going to be brighter even in darkness. It will actually become brighter, which is interesting and speaks a lot to what it is made of.
Absolutely, because the light in the phial, as we said, is from Eärendil's star, which, in case you haven't been listening to me, is a recurring symbol of hope throughout the Legendarium. And I'm going to read from the Silmarillion, chapter 24.
And an apparent fetish for Sean as well.
More than apparent, my friend. It is well documented and freely admitted.
There you go.
All right, reading from chapter 24, when Eärendil's star first arises. Now when first Vingelot was set to sail in the seas of heaven, and of course folks remember that Vingelot was the name of Eärendil's ship,
right?
It rose unlooked for, glittering and bright, and the people of Middle-earth beheld it from afar and wondered, and they took it for a sign, and called it Gil Estel, the star of high hope. Skipping ahead a little bit, then the elves looked up and despaired no longer, but Morgoth was filled with doubt.
Yeah.
So, symbol of hope. And the fact that the light in the phial is brighter in darkness, that is symbolic for the idea that hope is actually brighter in darkness.
That's right. It's that contrast we've talked about so often.
Absolutely. Now, I have a bit of idle speculation here.
Okay. That's our best kind.
I hope so. I could be reading way too much into this. Curious for your thoughts.
That's also common, yeah.
It's extremely common on this show where I'm concerned. So remember I said that I first saw this word in Greek in the New Testament when I was an undergrad.
Uh-huh.
The word fiale for a drinking bowl is actually used in the Greek text of the book of Revelation.
Right.
For the 7 bowls of God's wrath.
Yeah.
You recall the point in Revelation. I actually read Revelation in Greek.
Oh my goodness.
Which is the way to read it, folks.
Well, you got to read it. If you're going to read apocalyptic literature, reading in the original Greek is your best bet.
Absolutely. It's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing read in Greek. But yeah, it's that's the word that's used for the 7 bowls, which the angels pour out, and that's God's wrath.
Yeah.
That is where it appears in English for the first time. The Wycliffe Bible just pulled this word over and instead of translating it, just kind of rendered it into English.
Which is even older than the King James Bible, for anybody who's wondering.
Yeah, that's right. Going back to the 1300s.
Right.
So I just can't help thinking about, the original idea of a file as a vessel of wrath.
Oh.
Now Tolkien using a file as a vessel of hope.
Right.
Is he intentionally contrasting here with the biblical use of the word? Maybe this idea of sort of offering hope at what is certainly an apocalyptic moment for Middle Earth.
Yeah.
I freely admit I might be reading way too much into it, and this probably says more about my history with this word than anything Tolkien is thinking of. But
it might.
I don't know.
I don't know. That's a very good question. I mean, I tend to think that it's just him using a word and a spelling of that word that
is a bit more archaic.
Up that sort of archaic,
maybe
that archaic sense, that old sort of mythic sense. Yeah, there's nothing in the letters about it.
No, there's not.
About that word.
I mean, we know Tolkien knew his Greek. Obviously, Tolkien knew his Bible.
And he knew his Bible, yeah.
Yeah. But I can't prove it, and I'm not going to say that there's
biblical language often, right? I mean, these biblical phrases. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but we've come up.
We talked about
that reminds me.
Harden your heart, right?
Right,
we talked
harden
about
your
that
heart,
not
right?
Too long ago.
That's a Pharaoh Moses thing, right?
Yeah.
We've seen some others that are similar to that, or phrases that are similar to what he would have been familiar with in the Bible. So I don't know that he used it necessarily as a contrast, like, I'm going to use, this word is bowl of wrath, and now I'm going to use this thing that's sort of a file of hope. But I love the idea of it. I hope he did. I hope that's why he used it.
I guess I think back to what we talked about earlier this season with the idea of Eärendil as the Flammifer, and this idea of taking the Morning Star back from the Luciferian associations. And
that was I love that.
I don't know. I don't know. And I freely admit I'm probably reading too much into it, but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to place a bet, I'd say you're probably reading too much into it, and it's just a matter of him using something that sounds really archaic and biblical because he likes to use words like that. But it's nice to think that way.
It is.
I will say that.
And hey, applicability. So
absolutely, it's your privilege to look at it through that light.
Well, thank you, sir.
As if it's up to me to give you permission. I am the arbiter of all permissions in terms of allowed readings.
You're the one who edits the episodes, so.
Well, that's true. I could deny this. It's public existence. That's right.
Right.
So let's take a look at the history of the light that's in this file.
Yeah.
I just realized what our chapter is going to be when we get to Shelob's tunnel. Blinded by the light.
Of course.
Blinded
revved up like a deuce in the something.
Revved up like a deuce. I can't remember now. Yeah.
I don't even know. Manfred Mann's Earth Band.
Manfred Mann's Earth Band. That is correct. All the way back in 1976.
That's right. And it was a cover of a Bruce Springsteen song.
Oh, really?
It was.
That was a cover?
It was on Springsteen's first album.
Was Bruce Springsteen's first album a cover of Manfred Mann's, or was Manfred Mann's a cover of Bruce Springsteen?
Manfred Mann's was a cover of Bruce Springsteen's.
You're kidding me. Bruce Springsteen's first album was before 1976?
Bruce Springsteen's first album was 1973. Greetings from Asbury Park,
wow.
New Jersey.
I did not
Manfred
know
Mann's
this.
Earth Band covered Blinded by the Light in 1976. Reached top of the charts in February 1977.
That explains why neither of us remember it. We were very young.
I was one. Yep.
Shush.
Yep.
All right.
I know. That's one of those weird things that like nobody believes. Like, how was that possibly
a cover of Bruce Springsteen? Right.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. I don't know if that digression
we digress
all the way through, but it was very interesting. All right, so let's take a look at the history of the light in this file. It's the light of the two trees, all the way back to the beginning of the Silmarillion. So this light was imprisoned by Fëanor in a Silmaril, and I love that word that Tolkien uses. I don't think that's an accident. Those Silmarils were, of course, taken by Morgoth. One of those was reclaimed by Beren and Luthien, which was then passed down to Elwing and then to Eärendil. And now the light of that is set amid the waters of Galadriel's fountain.
Yes.
Keeping in mind, of course, the Silmaril that found its way through Beren and Luthien down to Elwing and then to Eärendil is on Vingalot in the heavens.
Right.
So it's not here, but we can capture the
No,
light
this
of it,
is
and that's what's been
this
happening.
is a copy of a copy of a copy, basically, of the light of the
Right.
trees. Yeah.
Mhm. Now, Verlin Flieger,
Maybe I put too many copies in that. Copy of a copy.
it's a copy of a copy.
It's a copy of a copy. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's just a copy of a copy.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a copy of a copy. The Silmaril itself is a copy of the light of the trees, and this is a copy of the light of the Silmaril. So it's a third best thing.
Yep.
Now, Verlin Flieger, who, I don't know, we should have her back on the show, shouldn't we, Sean?
We really should. I think that would be a great idea to do later this season.
That would be. We'll have to see what we can do. So she calls the file the closest parallel to Frodo in terms of light. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And then she says, this light has been divided just as Frodo has been divided, broken down just as he is gradually broken down. Nevertheless, as fragments, both the light and Frodo have a purpose, and each must follow its own nature. For the rest of his journey against the light, Frodo will carry the light with him, finding his way in dark places when all of the lights go out, by the last splinter of the true light. Oh,
man, that's brilliant.
Wow. Would have taken us an hour to figure that out.
I know, yeah. And she adds this, one of the things that Verlin Flieger loves to bring up in Splintered Light is, those contrasts, right? Those antitheses, the light and the dark and everything.
Antitheses. Uh-huh.
She brings up one here because she adds that a pattern of balance and opposition connects the file to Frodo and to the ring.
Mm.
As the story's all-important artifact, the ring and its darkness are so powerful and so pervasive that no equally powerful counterbalance is immediately perceivable. Nevertheless, like all forces in the story, the ring is balanced by an opposite, and that opposite is the file.
Wow.
As the ring is the cause of Frodo's journey, so the file is the beacon to light his way.
Mm.
As Galadriel's gift to him, it matches the ring, so often described as a present.
Ooh.
As light, it balances the ring's darkness. While the ring is designed to be worn, and thus encircles or contains its wearer, the file is carried in the hand, contained within its bearer.
Oh my goodness. Look at all those things she dug out of that. Wow.
It's like mind blown, right? It's like, wow.
Yeah. There's the top of my skull gone right
I
there.
wish I had something better to say about it, but wow,
We don't.
because it's just perfect.
That really is.
It is the anti-ring. I love to talk about
Tuor being the anti-Turin and
exactly. Ar-Pharazôn being the anti-Eärendil. The file is the anti-ring. It is the opposite of the ring, and I think she's absolutely right. And the contrast is so striking here. I especially love the idea that and I especially love the idea that the ring encircles the wearer. Remember we talked a few episodes ago about all those Irish words for bond and ring, and that whole idea of the ring being an unbreakable bond. And the ring encircles the wearer, but the file is something that you hold.
Right.
You hold within you, within your
contain
hand.
it instead of it containing you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Incredible.
Wow.
So
I get to follow that up with something that's really minor. I love how she tells him strongly to remember her and her mirror. Remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a last sentence that almost makes no sense. She could have just said, may it be a light to you in dark places when all the lights go out, cut, exit stage left, right?
Yeah.
Instead, she then says, remember Galadriel and her mirror.
Yeah.
He needs to remember what he saw. He needs to remember what he experienced when he looked in the mirror of Galadriel. And that just speaks further to what you pointed out from Dr. Flieger about the balance against the ring.
Yeah.
Against Sauron. Yeah.
Yep. I think you're right. And then he has this brief vision, almost sort of as the epilogue to the exchange. He has this brief vision of her again. She's again a great queen, great and beautiful, but she's no longer terrible.
Right.
Remember how she was at the end of the Mirror of Galadriel sequence.
That's right.
And all that terribleness, that shadow of her temptation is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And Frodo has no words to say. She's just she's not just a simple elf woman anymore. She is a great queen again. But it's like she's sort of ascended above that temptation.
She really has.
And Frodo's speechless.
Literally.
Yep.
All right, so now we're going to go ahead and, well, we're going to get out of here. It's time to leave. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So
That's right.
I'm going to go ahead and pick up.
Closing
and I'm just
time.
going to read a single paragraph before I defer to Sean once again.
Oh, my.
Now the lady arose, and Celeborn led them back to the Hithe. A yellow noon lay on the green land of the Tongue, and the water glittered with silver. All at last was made ready. The company took their places in the boats as before. Crying farewell, the elves of Lórien with long gray poles thrust them out into the flowing stream, and the rippling waters bore them slowly away. The travelers sat still without moving or speaking. On the green bank, near to the very point of the Tongue, the Lady Galadriel stood alone and silent. As they passed her, they turned, and their eyes watched her slowly floating away from them. For so it seemed to them, Lórien was slipping backward, like a bright ship masted with enchanted trees, sailing onto forgotten shores, while they sat helpless upon the margin of the gray and leafless world. Oh,
wow.
There's a little sense of despair at that very end. Really, this gray and leafless world and this helplessness. Oh,
yeah. It's like that separation, that final separation from Galadriel and Lórien, and they're like,
just heartbreaking.
Man. Yeah. But hey, let's go back to the beginning of that paragraph. So, as you said, they go back to the Hithe. They're led by Celeborn here,
right?
And the noon sun is shining.
Yeah,
you had something on this. It seems a little weird, doesn't it?
It does. This kind of thing happens not when I'm reading it as a normal person reads it, but as I'm reading it in preparation for the episodes, I happen to catch that this seemed a little odd because when they got to the Hithe, which was a while ago, right? This would be before the gifts, before the test ride of the boats, before Celeborn's geography lesson. The text says noon was at hand. Well, they've done quite a bit since then. I kind of wonder what happened here. I don't know if there's anything to discuss. I don't know if this is just Tolkien didn't catch this when he was editing his drafts. It just seems like a little thing to pick out. But thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to believe that this is like, the Lothlórien time bubble at work or anything like that. I don't think it's anything like that.
No.
I think it's just either it's not entirely literal. Maybe it was, maybe it's maybe before it was like 11:45,
11 o'clock, and now
like
it's 1:15 or something. Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you still say it's around noon as long as it's not much later than 1. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
All right.
But it is interesting. Yeah.
It is. Mm-hmm.
And so then they get back into the boats, taking the same places that they had before.
Right.
And
I want this seat. No, I want that seat. No, this isn't.
No, this is your seat, and this is where you're sitting. Stop fighting, Merry and Pippin.
That's right. No, we're not there yet. No. You'll get what you get, and you won't pitch a fit.
Exactly. And then the elves take these something not entirely friendly of thrust out at the end of long gray poles, but I suppose it's just an elvish thing.
I guess it is. And then we get the time bubble effect, right? I mean, earlier we were talking about the noon thing is not the time bubble, but this is. They feel like they're still at the edge of the margin of the world, and she's slipping backwards.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this has happened to me more times than I can count. I'm sitting in the parking lot. I've got my motor going. I'm getting ready to leave, or I'm getting ready to get out of the car, but I'm doing something until my engine's running.
Yeah.
And the car next to me starts to back out. And all of a sudden I panic because I must be going forward.
You're like, oh, wait, the car's moving. Right.
Right. The car's moving. Oh, wait, no, it's not.
Right.
This is kind of the converse of that, right?
Yeah.
They feel like they're not moving, but they are.
Yeah.
And they see her as moving. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And she's just fading away, just slipping backwards
so
away on
full
that water.
And so full of meaning because it's the idea that, she's going away. Mm-hmm. We're stuck here. She's going away, which is ultimately what's going to happen.
That is
the elves are going to go into the west, and they're going to be stuck here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now we get to some great stuff. Why did I let you take this, Sean? I don't know. I think it's just the cadence of the chapter because I knew I needed to give you Eärendil, but that meant I got to give you this next bit, and you're going to read some prose, and then we'll have some poetry.
All right. Even as they gazed, the silver load passed out into the currents of the great river, and their boats turned and began to speed southward. Soon the white form of the lady was small and distant. She shone like a window of glass upon a far hill in the westering sun, or as a remote lake seen from a mountain, a crystal fallen in the lap of the land. Then it seemed to Frodo that she lifted her arms in a final farewell, and far but piercing clear on the following wind came the sound of her voice singing. But now she sang in the ancient tongue of the elves beyond the sea, and he did not understand the words. Fair was the music, but it did not comfort him. Yet, as is the way of elvish words, they remained graven in his memory, and long afterwards he interpreted them as well as he could. The language was that of elven song, and spoke of things little known on Middle-earth.
Ai Lórien lantar lassi surinen, jeni unotime bevramer alderon. Jeni vilinte juldara vani ermi oromardi lissimiru voreva, andune pella vado tellumar nulluini, jasentintilari eleni, o Mario airetare lirinen.
Ah.
Wow. Just wow.
We're not following that.
No, we are not.
We might do a little bit on the P5.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah.
We probably went back and forth, I don't know, 3 or 4 times before the episode started. There's only really the 2 stanzas, so we can't each read one.
Right.
And we can't have the professor read both of them, but if the professor reads one, neither of us want to read the other.
Wants to follow him. I'm not going to follow him in Quenya, but I will translate.
Not a chance. Yes.
Or I will read his translation at least.
There you go. Read the prose translation. All right.
Ah, like gold fall the leaves in the wind, long years numberless as the wings of trees. The years have passed like swift draughts of the sweet mead in lofty halls beyond the west, beneath the blue vaults of Varda, wherein the stars tremble in the song of her voice, holy and queenly. Who now shall refill the cup for me? For now the kindler, Varda, the queen of the stars, from Mount Everwhite has uplifted her hands like clouds, and all paths are drowned deep in shadow. And out of a grey country darkness lies on the foaming waves between us, and mist covers the jewels of Calakiria forever. Now lost, lost to those from the east is Valimar. Farewell. Maybe thou shalt find Valimar. Maybe even thou shalt find it. Farewell.
Oh, goodness, that's such a beautiful, beautiful verse.
It is. It is.
Oh, goodness.
So enjoyed reading that.
Yeah. And again, you will owe me for that at some point. We'll figure out the price.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, shall we go back to the beginning of my passage?
Yeah, I think we should. So they merge with the end and they pick up steam. They're starting to really fade away from Lórien at this point. And then we get this appearance of Galadriel like a crystal. I don't think that word's totally accidental. I think, given our conversation earlier about the crystal that Gimli was going to put her hair in, I think, this isn't a gem or a diamond, it's a crystal, and there's a reason why that word's used. Well,
and then you think of the crystal of the file, right?
Right, absolutely, the crystal file.
And so, yeah, there's definitely a recurring theme here.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting that all of the things she's compared to here, and I have a feeling like Dr. Flieger would say this as well, these are all things that refract light.
Right.
A window of glass, a crystal, a lake.
Wow.
She's compared to all these clear things that
she is.
That refract light. I don't think that's an accident.
No, I don't think it is either.
And I'm feeling a strong compulsion to go read Splintered Light again right now.
That's never a bad compulsion to follow.
It's true.
It really
always a good time to read Splintered Light.
Can't go wrong. It's always there's never a bad time to read Splintered Light.
Yeah.
Or so many other of her things. But Galadriel appearing like a crystal, I was also thinking of not just the crystal that Gimli's going to house her hairs in, but the fact that she wears the ring of adamant, which is
That's right.
essentially diamond, but supposedly harder, right? It's this
right, like kind of like a mythical diamond type substance,
but it is clear. It is a clear gem, and
Absolutely,
once again we get this amazing refraction of light.
Yeah.
But then we get the voice, and she's almost out of sight, and yet she's not only able to sing this long song, but sing it loudly enough for them to hear it and clearly enough for Frodo to then remember the words for the rest of his life so that he could get back to the Shire and translate it. Pretty impressive.
That's pretty amazing. You know,
she enunciates to the back row.
she's a born performer, I guess.
Yes, she is.
You know, this isn't the usual thing we see with Elvish song, though, is it? I mean, it says, yet as is the way of Elvish words. But this isn't the usual Osanwe type thing that we see with, like, Gildor in the Woody End, where they sing and you actually understand the meaning of what they're singing.
Right.
This is different. Frodo...
The words themselves embed
Frodo remembers the words themselves, and we're not told that he understood it at the time. We're told that he translated it later. He interpreted it afterwards.
Yeah, he didn't understand it at the time. That was the whole point, yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that has to do with the fact that it's Quenya. Whether there's some sort of almost a magical power in the language itself.
Maybe.
I don't know.
It is the Elven Latin, the language of Elven song.
Yes, it is.
And the subject matter is stuff that is kind of above people of Middle Earth. It spoke of things little
well
known
above, as we'll get to when we talk about the translation here. In fact, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit there? I think you have some stuff on the translation itself.
Yeah, I've actually got some stuff here from The Road Goes Ever On. It says, with regard to the translation above, note that Ortane, line 10, is rendered has uplifted, but Ortane is a past tense and refers to events in the far past. The sea, now, in this line is anticipated and refers to the still enduring present results, described in the present tenses in lines 12 to 15. This is a Quenya method of saying what would be expressed in English by, now, Varda having lifted up her hands, darkness lies upon the sea between us. After the destruction of the two trees and the flight from Valinor of the revolting Eldar. Those Eldar are revolting.
They're so revolting.
You said it. They stink.
I'm so sorry. That is going to come back every time now.
Yeah. Varda lifted up her hands, in obedience to the decree of Manwë, and summoned up the dark shadows which engulfed the shores and the mountains, and last of all the Fëanor, figure, of Varda, with her hands turned eastward in rejection, standing white upon Oyolose.
Yeah. Boy, that is a vision right there.
Yeah.
She's not just saying, okay, y'all got to go and you can't come back. She's following Manwë's instructions and summoning up these shadows that take the light away, that reject the revolting Eldar.
Yeah.
Which is a great line.
It's like a physical barrier almost, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Physical barrier of darkness, no doubt about it. And then at the end, we get this. The last lines of the chant that talk about the Sivanwana Romello Vanwa Valimar Namarie Naihiruvalye Valimar, that part, the part that's, maybe you shall find Valimar, maybe even you shall find it. Those last lines express a wish or a hope that though she could not go, because at this point the ban still stands, Frodo might perhaps be allowed to do so. And Tolkien explains that the NA-I, which is in, it's the last line, Nai Elye Hiruva, that's be it that. And it expresses rather a wish than a hope. Tolkien says that it would be more closely rendered, may it be that thou wilt find, rather than maybe. In other words, it's not like, there's a chance that if you look, you might find Valimar.
Right.
It's more like, I wish for you to find Valimar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
May it be that this will happen. And to be clear, in case it wasn't clear, that the thou there is Frodo. She's talking.
Oh, yeah.
He's talking about how this is lost to her. I think you said this a moment ago, Alan.
That's correct.
But I just want to make it really clear. Yeah. This is something that's lost to her and to the other elves, those from the east.
That's right.
But you, Frodo, maybe you will find it. And I don't mean, like you just said, maybe. You might find it.
If you look between the couch cushions, you might find it. No, she's saying,
it's saying,
may you find
I wish that you will find it. I hope that you will find it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost a benediction.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful thing. I absolutely love it. And I have to say, every time I read that, instead of maybe, and I read it as may it be that, I hear may it be from the films. And
I'm sure that's exactly what that song is.
I know that. Yeah, that has to be. That has to be. So, Now, there's also a line-by-line interspersed translation of the poem and an amazing word-by-word analysis of the Quenya at Helga Fevskanger's website, Ardalambion, which we'll link in our show notes.
Yeah, we will put that up in our show notes, so go check that out there. Yeah. But we've got a few of those, a few interesting words from that translation that we wanted to talk about here. Yeah. Not in any particular order. We just kind of put a list together of like, oh, that's a cool one. We decided to talk about a few of them. Yeah.
And one of them is yenni, translated years. And this is from Tolkien himself in Appendix D. It seems clear that the Eldar in Middle-earth, who had, as Samwise remarked, more time at their disposal, reckoned in long periods. And the Quenya word yen, often translated year, really means 144 of our years. The Eldar preferred to reckon in 6s and 12s as far as possible.
Of course they did, because
which suggests that they actually had 6 hands, 6 fingers on each hand. They must have based 12. Yeah,
creepy.
It's creepy all of a sudden, isn't it?
It is. Right after that word yenni, you get this word linte, which means swift. Now, according to Helga Fefskanger at Ardalambian, he says, this word goes back to Tolkien's childhood. In the primitive Nevbosh language, and you'll know all about Nevbosh if you've read, Carpenter's biography.
Right.
But in this language that he and some other kids made, lint meant quick, clever, nimble. And lint also did show up in his it shows up in his late Elvish languages too, of course, but it even showed up early on in one of Thingol's early names in the Book of Lost Tales, which was Tinwalint. The lint in that means swift. So, that was a word that Tolkien kind of carried with him throughout his life.
Over
from
all of his language. That's amazing. Yeah. Very cool.
Then let's see, later in this first stanza, we get Vardo. And later in the next stanza, we get Kalakirio. Right. These are just familiar Quenya words, Varda and Kalakiria. Right. But this is the genitive form, the of form.
Okay, so of Varda, of Kalakiria. Right.
Yep, exactly. Okay. So basically what you do to form the genitive or the of form, you just drop the A and you add an O.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Then we get Tintilar, which per Tolkien himself means tremble, or more literally twinkle, per Fefskanger. And then Fefskanger goes on to speculate, may Tintila actually be a passive or reflexive stem of tinta, caused to sparkle or kindle, the form tintilar implying that the stars are caused to sparkle or are causing themselves to sparkle. If so, then it's related to Varda's epithet, tintale, the kindler. I like that one. Yeah. And then, of course, a word that we've touched on not too long ago, hissie, which means mist. And we've seen that in words like Hithlum and Hithline, which is when we last discussed it.
Right. And then you get this wonderful little hyphenated phrase, Lisse Miruvodeva.
Yeah, you got to pronounce that one. You didn't give that one to me even. Fine.
I get the mead word, because I'm
okay. I mean, I can still say Lisse
mead after we're done
Miruvodeva.
recording this. Yeah, Lisse
You're going to have a glass of mead? All right, then.
Probably, yeah. So Fefskanger says Lisse is clearly the element translated sweet.
Right.
Of course, because the Miruvodeva part is obviously mead. We know Miruvor.
And Eva must be the of the.
Right. Fefskanger says the etymologies gives lis, honey. Going on a little bit, he says Miruvodeva is the possessive form of Miruvore, here translated mead. According to The Road Goes Ever On, Miruvore was, and I think we've talked about this quote before,
we did,
a word derived from the language of the Valar, the name that they gave to the drink poured out at their festivals.
That's right. We talked about that, I think, the first time we saw Miruvor.
I think so, yeah.
Then we get the word enquantuva, and that means shall refill. It's another way of saying shall fill again. If you look at this word, you'll see it has a very similar structure to Hurin's famous phrase, aure entuluva, day shall come again.
Yeah, so basically what that tells us, by looking at these two words together and seeing what they have in common, you can deduce that the N prefix in Quenya is similar to re in English. It basically means to do whatever again.
Okay.
Enquantuva.
Entuluva.
Refill, shall refill. Entuluva, shall come again.
Right.
In both cases, en means again or again, like we would put re at the beginning of a verb in English. And in both cases, uva would be that future tense ending. So it's exactly the same form of two different verb stems. And from that, you can deduce that quant means fill and then tul means come. So
there you go. There's your word nerdery for the day. Almost.
Yep.
You've got one more.
I do, yes. And before I get to this, because we haven't really had a chance to touch on the meaning of the poem yet, have we?
No.
I feel like we haven't really spent a whole lot of time talking about the poem in general.
We have talked about this poem, I think, a little bit. I think when we were with the elves at Woody End.
Did we?
No, it was Tolkien Reading Day. And we were doing this would have been a couple years ago when poetry and song was the theme.
Yeah. I don't know. I just wondered if maybe we should talk a little bit about, what it actually means. I mean, it's this
I think we should. Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautifully sad song that really is kind of a variation on a theme we saw last time, right? It's very similar in terms of thematic content. It's all about this very potent sense of loss.
Yes.
And being deprived of the beauty of Valinor. And you get similar imagery with the falling leaves. You get this really beautiful image of this empty cup, comparing the years passing to drinking mead, and sort of this idea of these fleeting joys of these years,
right,
being compared to the mead, and now it's gone. You can't refill that
refill
cup.
It. You don't get free refills at this restaurant.
That's what Galadriel says when she's at the restaurant. That's her passive aggressive way of getting the waiter to come over. Who now shall refill the cup for me?
That's going to be my line now. Well, when restaurants are open again. Who now shall refill the cup for me? No.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
it's just a very sad, there's something sort of Germanic about it, because, I'm thinking about things like those Ubi Sunt poems, like The Wanderer, where now is this person? Where now is that thing?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And this is, who now can refill this cup for me?
Right.
Very sad. It's just, again,
because we've been separated.
Yeah.
Varda has uplifted her hands in accordance with Manwë's command, and now we are
pushed us out. Yeah.
Yeah. We're separated from where we belong, from the West. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And we can't even see it now. The jewels of Kalakiria are hidden now by the mist.
Yeah.
It's lost forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as we said earlier, this idea that this is lost for me. I'm done. My time is over. I can't have this again. Of course, she doesn't realize that she will. But right now she's thinking, I can't have this again, but maybe you can. Or may it be that you can.
May it be that you can. That's right. May it be that you can go.
So anyway, I wanted to spend a little time on it, because it's easy to kind of brush over it because it's all in Quenya, and you're just like, I can't read this. But spending a little time on the English and really focusing on what this poem's about. And I just think it's interesting that Tolkien has a couple of these poems in this chapter that are all sort of about the same thing, really, in a way.
Oh, yeah. And there's a reason why that's on her mind. This is the end of Lórien as we know it.
Yeah.
And she doesn't feel fine.
And she feels fine.
We both got the reference and threw it out there. That's brilliant. I like that. Oh, man.
Actually, she doesn't feel fine. She feels
right.
really
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
she's very sad.
Yeah.
Which is why she writes laments in both Sindarin and Quenya. Yeah.
Yep.
It's just another song she wrote on a folder when she was in class,
All her teenage poetry.
Between the time she was writing notes back to the company.
Right.
She likes you.
Yeah. Right.
She must really like you. She's giving you these garments. She likes me. What? Anyway. That was funny, I have to say.
It was. I know.
I'm trying to, picturing her as some junior high, here's a note thing.
Some good times there.
With the check boxes and everything. All right.
Yes or no.
That's right.
And now, finally, I want to do a little bit of word nerdery on the sentence that I didn't read, where it talks about Elbereth being...
yes.
Elbereth and Varda being the same person. Obviously, if you haven't read the Silmarillion, you're reading this for the first time. You've seen the name Elbereth before, but you haven't seen the name Varda before. And so Tolkien equates these for us so we know who he's talking about. I just wanted to point out that Elbereth is not only an epithet for Varda, it's sort of a nickname for her, because Elbereth means Star Queen, but it's also a cognate of the name Varda as well. Remember, last episode we talked about Tall Brandir, and we talked about the second word, Brandir, being from this root that means lofty or noble. Well, if I may pull out Parma Eldalamberon 17 again, that root comes in several variant forms. It comes in forms like Barat, Barath, Barad, like Barad-dûr. We talked about that.
Yeah.
And Baras.
Okay.
So, according to the lexicon in Parma Eldalamberon 17, Bereth, as in Elbereth, comes from the Barath form of that root.
Okay.
And Varda, the Quenya form, Varda, actually comes from the Barad form. It would have once upon a time been Barada.
Okay.
So it's just very interesting that Elbereth is not only a nickname for Varda, but also in some ways just a translation of her name.
Yeah, it really is. They both have that same root. Wow,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the next passage. I thought for a minute I was going to read to the end of the chapter, but I'm not. I actually have you surprisingly reading the last paragraph. But
That's right.
I'm going to read this next little bit, mostly about Gimli and Legolas. Suddenly the river swept round a bend. Just around the river bend.
Is that the second time in
this
weeks
chapter?
that you've brought
I
that?
think it was just last week too. That's why
Yeah.
I did it. And the banks rose upon either side, and the light of Lórien was hidden. To that fair land Frodo never came again. The travelers now turned their faces to the journey. The sun was before them, and their eyes were dazzled, for all were filled with tears. Gimli wept openly. I have looked the last upon that which was fairest, he said to Legolas, his companion. Henceforward I will call nothing fair, unless it be her gift. He put his hand to his breast. Tell me, Legolas, why did I come on this quest? Little did I know where the chief peril lay. Truly Elrond spoke, saying that we could not foresee what we might meet on our road. Torment in the dark was the danger that I feared, and it did not hold me back. But I would not have come had I known the danger of light and joy. Now I have taken my worst wound in this parting, even if I were to go this night straight to the Dark Lord. Alas for Gimli, son of Glóin. Nay, said Legolas, alas for us all, and for all that walk the world in these after days. For such is the way of it, to find and lose, as it seems to those whose boat is on the running stream. But I count you blessed, Gimli, son of Glóin. For your loss you suffer of your own free will, and you might have chosen otherwise. But you have not forsaken your companions, and the least reward that you shall have is that the memory of Lothlórien shall remain ever clear and unstained in your heart, and shall neither fade nor grow stale. Maybe, said Gimli, and I thank you for your words. True words, doubtless, yet all such comfort is cold. Memory is not what the heart desires. That is only a mirror, be it clear as Caledzaram. Or so says the heart of Gimli the dwarf. Elves may see things otherwise. Indeed, I have heard that for them memory is more like to the waking world than to a dream. Not so for dwarves.
Man,
his heart is just broken.
You just,
oh,
yeah. There's that Khuzdul proverb, which I'm trying to think of how it's translated. I think it's the power of love is a curious thing. Make a one dwarf weep, make another dwarf sing.
My goodness, that's just brilliantly terrible, Sean. I like that.
Thank you. That's why I'm here.
You threw me by calling it a Khuzdul proverb first. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
No, he did not just do that.
Yep, that was Hugo Lewis.
Hugo Lewis, yes.
And the Nogrod. Anyway. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry, actually.
No, that is a not sorry. You're not sorry for that one bit. You developed that in your head. Yeah.
I did.
That wasn't even fully spontaneous. You're like, ooh, let me think.
No, I had it ready to go. I did.
Did
I just couldn't tell you about it.
Nicely done. Nicely done, sir. All right.
Anyway. No, it is really a heartbreaking moment for him.
It is. It really is.
And it doesn't help that they feel so separated from Lórien all of a sudden. You know, they just feel themselves like snapped out of it.
Yeah.
Like snapped out of a dream, basically.
Yeah. They're out of that bubble now. They're in the real world now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And it's disappearing.
Even the light is
sight.
hidden.
Yeah. It's gone. We get the spoiler. Frodo doesn't come back.
No, that's because he dies. I'm just kidding. I mean, really, if we're going to spoil the story for people, let's spoil it falsely.
We might,
so
might as well. Yeah.
Little red herring there for people to follow. A little false flag. All right.
Well, don't tell them that. Let them.
Well, come on.
Let them keep guessing. Maybe somebody hasn't read this before.
Maybe.
Oh, we've spoiled it so much.
I know. Seriously, if they're still with us by now, I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah.
So all of them were crying. All of them. Every last one of the people were crying. And Gimli, the dwarf, the one you'd think would be, stone hard and stoic, weeping openly.
Oh, he's broken.
No shame. He is just broken.
Yep.
Man, and his words to Legolas, there's nothing, literally nothing that compares to what she gave me. Nothing.
Nothing compares to you.
Nothing compares to you. All right, then. You going to keep on referencing songs?
Why not?
This is a great place to do it, I'm sure.
You know.
There's lots of stuff here.
There is.
Well,
this is a love. I mean, this is like a love song. This is a sad.
Is.
This is like a sad song. This is like a kind of like the love song, you know.
It's like a sad love song. Which
Yeah.
would probably be like, I don't know, whenever I'm alone with you, you make me feel like I'm home again. Whenever I'm alone with you, I mean, the Cure didn't do anything. It was happy.
You went straight to the Cure, man. That's dark for Gimli.
Well, I could have gone Morrissey. I mean, there's not
you
much darker
totally
than
gone
that.
Smiths on this. You totally could have, and you didn't. That's true.
No, I went to the Cure. That works for me.
Yeah.
All right. Discovering where the real peril was.
Gimli misses Galadriel. He's just going to go back to his room and just listen to the Cure all the time.
Seriously, the Cure, the Smiths, Morrissey, maybe a little Depeche Mode. Yeah, he's...
No wonder I liked this book so much in high school.
I know, seriously. I'm with you there.
Anyway.
And then Gimli talks about discovering where the real peril was.
Yeah.
He was fearing torment in the dark. I'm not afraid of that, right?
Right.
But I would not have come. I would not be on this journey had I known how dangerous two things are: light and joy.
Man.
How dangerous are those? They are dangerous.
We see
because
how dangerous
when they go
are,
away,
yeah.
That's right. When they go away,
you're deprived
leave
of them,
a
and you
hole.
feel that loss. You feel that emptiness.
Oh, this is, and he says it. Look, I mean, and I know he is being a little melodramatic. He's like an 8th grader who finally had his first girlfriend, and now it's summer break, and she's like on vacation for a few months.
Right.
And he's not, I'm never going to see her again. I'm never going to see her again.
This is the worst wound ever. Even if I went straight to Sauron tonight, this is worse.
That's right. So it's a little over the top, but you get it, don't you? Yeah.
You totally get it. Absolutely. Yeah. Because there's truth to it.
There's truth to it.
And all the jokes in the world that we're making right now, somebody is out there saying, come on, guys, don't make a joke about this. No, we're making a joke about it because that's what we do. But the truth is, this is real. This is a real loss. This is a real sense of deprivation of something that you love, something that you didn't know that you loved so much it was going to hurt when it wasn't there.
He had no idea that he was going to care about. And this is his entire heart has just been poured out. And now, and now it's gone. The joy that he had is gone. The beauty that he saw is gone. That it's now only going to be a memory. And we'll get to that because, boy, there's something there. But let's talk a little bit about Legolas's response first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Legolas basically says, to find and to lose is the way of the world.
Yeah. And he would know that. He's been around for a long time.
Absolutely. This is just life. Remember, this is a fallen world. You find something, you lose it.
This is Ardamard. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what we know about Middle Earth is that things are lost all the time in Middle Earth.
All the time.
Or in real Earth, by the way.
Well, yeah, that's true. This is just what happens in real life.
Yeah. But Legolas, such a good friend here. This is such a great moment. He says, but I count you blessed because this loss was your own choice and you could have done differently.
Right.
You could have abandoned us.
Yeah. He could have stayed. Remember, that was one of the options.
Yeah, that was one of the options.
Until
Absolutely.
we call you
they were
to
given
fight.
That choice. Yep.
Yeah. He could have stayed with Galadriel.
Yeah. I don't know how Celeborn would have felt about that, but he could have stayed. He could have stuck around. He could have devoted his life to her. He could have been her bodyguard or something and just,
Didn't they make a movie about that? Sorry.
I'm not going to sing that one. No, I'm not going to sing that one.
I will not let you. I will edit that out if you do. Just know.
No, I'm not going to. I can't. I can't hit those notes. No.
No, I know you can't. Not without serious bodily injury. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But now that memory will be clear and unstained.
Yeah.
Ever clear and unstained.
Mm-hmm.
It shall remain that way and will never fade or grow stale.
That's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. He's right.
You spent time with her and you will carry that love with you and it will bear your love into the undying lands where it shall remain evergreen.
Oh, goodness. But then he says it's never going to fade or grow stale. And that's where we get this little disagreement. Gimli's like, well, wait a minute. No, memory for us is different. Memory isn't what I want. That's just a mirror. It's like a picture. I want the real experience. And this is so true. Our greatest experiences, the moments that touch us most deeply, they can't be relived. They can only be remembered. And that is really, it's a grievous truth.
Yeah.
It's just so sorrowful, and it causes such that bittersweetness as we remember something, we can never experience it. We can't relive it. And Gimli wonders, is it different for elves? He understands, he hears that memory is more real than it is for us. That for them, memory is a much
is more like the waking
thing.
world. It is right. It is more present for them.
Is that the case? I don't know.
Maybe.
What a gift that is.
We don't know.
I have to say, there are some things that I would love to be able to remember as almost as a secondary experience, than to just be able to kind of glance back in my mind and recall it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what you say about memory and those memories of those greatest experiences. Yeah. There's a sadness there because you can never recapture it. Whether it's something like, your wedding day or the birth of your child, or just something like reading Lord of the Rings for the first time.
Right.
We talk about that all the time on the show. You can't relive that experience of reading it the first time.
No,
and so there's something really true and really beautiful about that. And yet, think about this from the elves' perspective. Yes, if what Gimli says here is true about the elves and their memory, how it's different, then not only do they remember the good stuff more acutely, but the bad stuff too.
And they've got a lot more of both because they're certainly longeval. Millennia of memories.
Right. And think about that and go back and read Galadriel's Lament again. And think about that memory of what she's lost. And how much that must hurt her every single day.
Every single time she thinks about it, and which is all the time. The grief, the very present, always present grief.
And compare that with what we would think of that memory like. And that's
right.
That is powerful. And I'm just sort of thinking of that as we're talking about it here. And how amazing it is that Tolkien weaves this comment from Gimli into the end of this chapter after we've just seen all this lament from Galadriel, all this memory from Galadriel. I think he's telling us something. I don't think he's just talking about Gimli and Legolas. I think he's telling us about Galadriel's own memories and how powerful they are. Wow.
I know. Just wow indeed.
Yeah. I guess we've got some practical matters to talk about.
Yes, we do.
Moving on. The boat's too low. The river is fast. So, let's get back on with it.
Right.
Gotta forget. It's like that moment when you've just had that real serious heart to heart with your friend, kind of like we just now did.
That's
and
true.
You're like, all right. And they're like, all right, I'm done. Now let's get on, man. Anyway, How about them?
Those are. I'm just wiping my face. I don't know what was there.
Yeah, but no, it's. But yeah, it's kind of like it's this very manly moment of covering it up. And it's like, anyway, the boat's too low. We got to get going. Let's follow Aragorn.
Great River Swift. We got to get going.
Yeah.
But he prefaces that by saying, essentially, I want to stop talking about this thing that I've already talked too much about already.
So he admits it. Yeah. He doesn't.
He knows.
He doesn't try to cover it up. He's like, I'm uncomfortable talking about this with my bro.
But let us talk no more of it. We're going to move on. Moving on.
And
maybe that's our new thing. When we're going to move on, I should just say, but let us talk no more of it.
But let us talk no more of it. Look to the boat.
There you go.
Let's just say look to the boat, just because it's utterly random, and we'll just confuse people.
Look to the boat.
Interesting. Here, last time I talked about how wonderfully Tolkien balanced the load between, 3 guys in one boat, 3 guys in another boat, 2 guys in the bags in the third boat. Obviously, this boat is still too heavy. So
a little bit. Too low.
Not as well balanced as I thought.
Maybe they needed to share the load.
Nicely done.
That weird Sam reference of him talking all slowly and stuff. All right. I am going to have you read the last paragraph of this chapter before we wrap this up.
All right. So the company went on their long way down the wide, hurrying waters, borne ever southwards. Bare woods stalked along either bank, and they could not see any glimpse of the lands behind. The breeze died away, and the river flowed without a sound. No voice of bird broke the silence. The sun grew misty as the day grew old, until it gleamed in a pale sky like a high white pearl. Then it faded into the west, and dusk came early, followed by a gray and starless night. Far into the dark, quiet hours they floated on, guiding their boats under the overhanging shadows of the western woods. Great trees passed by like ghosts, thrusting their twisted, thirsty roots through the mist down into the water. It was dreary and cold. Frodo sat and listened to the faint lap and gurgle of the river fretting among the tree roots and driftwood near the shore, until his head nodded, and he fell into an uneasy sleep. That's how I'm feeling, man. It's late.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were saying?
No, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, no. All this talk of going to sleep made me want to go to sleep. But what do we have? We have woods along the banks. It's silent. There's no breeze. There's not even birdsong.
The sun is misty and hazy.
Yeah.
It's faded early.
Right. Like a high white pearl. I know what kind of sky he's talking about. It's really hazy.
Yeah.
You can see that's where the sun is, but it's not giving any warmth.
It's kind of like it's like a pale, kind of pallid light from the sun. Yeah.
Yeah. A wan light. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good word for it. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then dusk comes early, followed by a gray and starless night. I can't help but remind everyone once again that where there are stars, there are elves.
And here we see the converse of that.
Exactly. And here we see the converse. There are no stars, there are no elves.
Right.
Well, there's one.
Well, yeah.
It's a very sad, drab, almost kind of lifeless description.
Oh, yeah.
And I
want woods, no sound, no voice of a bird even.
No color, no sound. And I want to contrast this with the description of their first arrival in Lórien. So I'm going to read from a couple of chapters ago here. He saw no color but those he knew, gold and white and blue and green. But they were fresh and poignant, as if he had at that moment first perceived them and made for them names new and wonderful. In winter here no heart could mourn for summer or for spring. No blemish or sickness or deformity could be seen in anything that grew upon the earth. On the land of Lórien there was no stain.
Wow.
Could this be any more different from that?
You're not kidding. This is exactly the opposite of that. That contrast is so strong. Goodness.
Yeah. This is like impossibly escapable winter.
Yes.
Dead, drab, lifeless, gray.
Dreary.
And you see the contrast of
you really
coming into Lórien versus leaving it. And you get a sense of that sadness that they're feeling.
Yeah. And then you get sleep coming on as the trees reach into the water and you hear the tree roots in the driftwood. Yeah.
Yep. And Frodo falling asleep to the sounds of the river, catching some much-needed Z's.
Yeah, but it's an uneasy sleep.
That is true. It is an uneasy sleep. That's a good point. Yeah, good point.
Now, of course, we don't want our listeners to fall into an uneasy sleep. We have Bartleman's Bag coming your way in just a minute.
Nicely segued.
I keep trying. Even when that's done, as always, the talk continues all night long at the Prancing Pony.
That is correct. We've always got lots of discussion happening in our social media spaces. At our common room on Facebook, you'll find comments, questions, corrections, and more on every episode, as well as updates from us throughout the week. Just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook and click the like and follow buttons.
And now we have another common room over on Reddit. You can find great discussions there at r/PrancingPonyPod. Now, as always, you can find us on Twitter and on Instagram with the handle @PrancingPonyPod. Follow us wherever you happen to be. And if you like us, please share us on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, anywhere you happen to find Tolkien fans.
And if you really want to let the world know your feelings about us, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts. The more reviews we have, the more visible our podcast is, and that helps others find us and this amazing community of Tolkien fans that we've built together.
Indeed. Now, if you'd like access to exclusive content like postscripts, quarterly specials, PPP swag, and more, check out patreon.com/prancingponypod to find out how you can join the fellowship of the podcast. Now, I think it's time to see what old Bartleman has in the mailbag for us. Sean.
Okay, well, I know we're running kind of long here, but I think we still have time for a couple of questions, especially since these two questions are both on the same topic. Some time ago, Sarah S. wrote to us to ask, I've always loved the part where Galadriel agrees to gift 3 hairs to Gimli at his request, because of the contrast to Fëanor's request before the Noldor return to Middle-earth, which she refuses. And of course, we talked about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah says, my personal opinion is that since Galadriel refused Fëanor because she saw a shadow or darkness in him even before he went overtly to the bad, withholding the Silmaril and the kinslaying and all that bad stuff that he later did.
Right.
Says, because of that, this must mean that she saw light and good in Gimli that made her decide to agree to the request this time. But my question, Sarah says, is regarding something that only just occurred to me. Galadriel lived in Doriath for a while, which was destroyed by dwarves. I don't remember whether she was still living there at the time or if she and Celeborn had already moved elsewhere by then, but I imagine she would still have been upset, and this would have affected her greatly. Would you be willing to speculate on how this affected Galadriel's view on dwarves in general, and why it doesn't seem to affect her dealings with Gimli?
Oh, we are always willing to speculate, Sarah.
Always. Absolutely. Especially when we've got some stuff from the text, which I think we do. But
I think we do. But before we do, we have another email that Bartleman got to us just a few days ago. Matt from Wisconsin wrote us to say, I've always thought that in some ways, the gift that Gimli names at Galadriel's request recalls the Silmarils and presents the ideas of vessels of light as they should have been. Hear me out, he suggests. So we shall. Galadriel's hair is said to have ensnared the light of the two trees, and we read that passage from Unfinished Tales. And it is said that the radiance of her hair originally gave Fëanor the idea of imprisoning the light of the trees in the Silmarils. He then points out that Galadriel, then as always being unfriends with Fëanor, refuses him 3 times his request for a tress of hair, and that results in his going it alone with his creation, though he probably would have had the same prideful attitude even if Galadriel had granted his request. Of course he would have.
Oh, yes.
And then Matt goes on to say that in a neat inversion, Gimli, many thousands of years later, humbly refuses to request anything, but when pressed, simply states his desire for a single lock of Galadriel's hair and states he would place it in imperishable crystal, like a Silmaril, as an heirloom of the friendship of elves and dwarves. And then, of course, Galadriel gives not 1 but 3 locks of hair.
Right.
So Matt goes on to describe Gimli's non-possessive courtesy as very un-Fëanorian, and that his courtesy combined with Galadriel's generosity, quote, preserves after a fashion the light of the trees. He says that the light's been shared in a way that does not provoke jealousy and possessiveness and enriches the world. And then he finishes by suggesting that Galadriel, this is a great quote, is Fëanor as he should have been, that her ambition to go rule realms in Middle-earth becomes but Iluvatar's instrument, little spabimmy for you, in ennobling the races of men and helping defeat the darkness.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 related questions. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Galadriel's motivations, some of the Fëanorian contrasts here.
Right.
I'm actually going to start with Sarah's question because that is a slightly easier one, and it is one that's directly answered in the text.
Yeah, it is.
To Sarah's question, it does seem as though Galadriel was living in Doriath when it was destroyed. We know Celeborn was there, and so we have every reason to believe that Galadriel was still living with him.
Mm-hmm.
As we learn in a passage that we read from Unfinished Tales, in that history of Galadriel and Celeborn that we've been reading from pretty much every week for the last few weeks.
Just about.
We learn that Celeborn hated dwarves after that, but Galadriel did not. And I'm going to read a little bit here. Galadriel was more far-sighted in this than Celeborn, and she perceived from the beginning that Middle-earth could not be saved from the residue of evil that Morgoth had left behind him, save by a union of all the peoples who were in their way and in their measure opposed to him. She looked upon the dwarves also with the eye of a commander,
there you go,
seeing in them the finest warriors to pit against the orcs.
Mm-hmm.
Moreover, Galadriel was a Noldo, and she had a natural sympathy with their minds and their passionate love of crafts of hand, a sympathy much greater than that found among many of the Eldar. The dwarves were the children of Aule, and Galadriel, like others of the Noldor, had been a pupil of Aule and Yavanna in Valinor.
Mm-hmm.
Unfinished Tales even refers to her friendship with the dwarves of Moria a couple of paragraphs later on. She didn't just tolerate or use them. She was actually friends with dwarves. So I think to Sarah's question, Galadriel didn't hate dwarves after what happened in Doriath. Celeborn did. And,
yeah.
You know,
we still see that, right?
I suppose I can understand, how he got there.
Why.
But, we know that he still bears a grudge against dwarves. But Galadriel did not. She saw them as friends, and she saw them, as I think you said a little earlier, Alan, she saw them as an important part of the war against evil.
That's right. A very powerful ally to have. Great warriors against the orcs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if I can move on a little bit to Matt's question then, her gift to Gimli isn't just like an olive branch between foes. This is this is a gift that's given in genuine friendship.
Yeah, it is.
So I think with that, why don't we talk a little bit about the relationship of this gift to the Silmarils?
Sure. Well, I'm going to say that this gift is certainly reminiscent of the Silmarils, though I wouldn't go so far as to say they're representative of the Silmarils. Matt kind of said as much at one point in his email. We never see the heirlooms that Gimli says he'll create, but they're certainly not new Silmarils. They don't have the raw, unfiltered light of the trees, and Gimli isn't Fëanor.
Well, no. I mean, if he was Fëanor, he would kill Legolas and burn the boats in the next chapter.
The next time they land the boats. That's right. That's right.
None and none.
Oh, man, another good thwack. So Matt admits that the file that Galadriel gives Frodo is more pure, as it traps the actual light of the Silmaril from Eärendil, which we talked about earlier. And I agree. That's the one that's closer to the Silmaril. But let's speculate.
Yeah, I mean, we see that Gimli has an utter lack of possessiveness over the request. I mean, we saw earlier when you read it that he doesn't even really ask for it. He just says, you know what, since you're telling me to name what I'm thinking of, I'm going to name it. I'm not going to ask for it. I'm going to name it.
Right.
That's not possessive. He knows he has no right to ask for this.
None at all. No standing. That's right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
How the gift enriches the world. I mean, there's a certain Silmarilness to that, I guess. We saw how Fëanor deprived the sight of the Silmarils from everybody, right? He ended up locking them in a casket and only taking them out.
Keep them in Formenos,
Yeah. Every once in a while he'd wear them just to kind of lord it over everybody with his Silmarils. And we see how the Silmaril that Beren and Luthien took and that eventually made its way to Eärendil, we see how that enriches the world through the hope that it gives once it's shining in the sky. So there's definitely something contrasting with Fëanor, but also sort of comparing in a favorable way to what happens to the Silmaril with Eärendil.
Yeah.
Galadriel as Fëanor as he should have been. That's a mind blower. I really like that.
I do too.
Yeah.
We touched on this, didn't we? I mean, I think you've got a quote from a passage in Unfinished Tales that gives some insight on this.
Yeah, I think this might actually shed some light on this. So I'm going to go ahead and read this and we can maybe talk about it a little bit.
Sure.
A wholly different story, adumbrated but never told, of Galadriel's conduct at the time of the rebellion of the Noldor appears in a very late and partly illegible note. The last writing of my father's on the subject of Galadriel and Celeborn, and probably the last on Middle-earth and Valinor, set down in the last month of his life. Wow, let that sink in for a moment.
Yeah, wow.
In this he emphasized the commanding stature of Galadriel already in Valinor, the equal if unlike in endowments of Fëanor, and it is said here that so far from joining in Fëanor's revolt, she was in every way opposed to him. She did indeed wish to depart from Valinor and to go into the wide world of Middle-earth for the exercise of her talents. For being brilliant in mind and swift in action, she had early absorbed all of what she was capable of the teaching which the Valar thought fit to give the Eldar, and she felt confined in the tutelage of Aman. This desire of Galadriel's was, it seems, known to Manwë, and he had not forbidden her, but nor had she been given formal leave to depart.
Well, she really is sort of the anti-Fëanor. Remember we were talking about Tuor being the anti-Turin and the File being the anti-Ring.
Absolutely, yeah, if you look at that. And I know I kind of grumbled about that when we talked about it a few episodes ago, because I kind of liked the rebellious Galadriel more. But when you look at it like this, absolutely, she is the anti-Fëanor.
The equal, if unlike an endowment. Yes. The equal of Fëanor.
Yeah.
That's huge, people. Let's not miss that. For
Let's
Tolkien to say she was the equal of Fëanor is incredible.
She was his equal, but in every way opposed to him. So equal in
every way,
equal in power and endowments, but utterly
unlike in endowments, right?
Well, equal in the measure of her endowments.
Oh, okay, yeah. I guess.
Yeah. That's what I mean to say. Equal in how much endowments she had, but not in the types of endowments she had.
She was very endowed, is what you're saying.
She was. Nope, I'm not saying that.
No, we're not saying that, Celeborn. Please do not kill me. All right.
But no, she was equal in power, equal in gifts,
yes,
just different gifts. I think that's what that really means. And so, yes, I think there is a very real sense in which she is Fëanor as he should have been. And that's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good insight, Matt. Thanks for that.
I think with that, I think we need to go back and redo the last few chapters.
Oh, no. Maybe in season 17.
Maybe so.
All
Maybe
right.
so.
Folks, for now, though, that does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Now, please be sure to join us next week when we will be humiliated live in front of, and quite possibly by, our audience in our 11th quarterly Questions After Nightfall.
Those are always fun, I have to say, Alan.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
except when they're not, because we get completely stumped.
Well,
but even
yeah,
then,
that's
it's
kind
still
of
fun.
embarrassing. It can be, that's true, especially when they stump you. I like it that way.
Yeah.
I like it that way.
Yeah, that's true. When they stump you, it's a lot more fun for me.
See, that's how it works. That's how this show maintains its chemistry, people. Schadenfreude. Absolute Schadenfreude. Yeah.
That's why we never ask for help on those, because it's always like, nope, I'm not helping you.
Nope.
You dig that hole, man. Go ahead.
That's right. Keep on digging. Here's another shovel.
That's right. Here you go.
Now, as always, folks, we want to thank each of you for listening. But we do also want to give a very special thank you to our patrons at the Kier Dance contribution tier. James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Bruce in California, Mario in Utah, Seth in Texas, Ella in California, Joseph in Texas, and Kathy from North Carolina. Thank you all so very much.
And make sure you don't miss a single episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, and most of all, your songs of lament in Quenya to barlaman@theprancingponypodcast.com.
Barlaman is, I'm very proud to say, getting a little bit more punctual with the mail. He's finally
Indeed,
getting
I
on his
hear he
game a
is.
little bit.
Yeah.
He's been listening, I guess, and he started feeling bad about all the things we were saying about him.
Either that or he was threatened by our lawyers. I'm not sure which.
Could be that too. So, anyway, getting a little bit better with the mail, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. And your question or comment may be featured on an upcoming show.
That it might. Well, folks, this has been, despite it being longer than usual, far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.